Chapter 1183. The Tao fire represented the cultivation of a strong man. There was no difference between the strong and the weak, only the high and the low. In short, the 3,000 Tao fires that appeared in Zhou Su, which were as dazzling as the sun, represented the cultivation of the 3,000 strong men who ranked first on the ladder of heaven. But it didn't mean that their respective combat power was strong or weak. It was just a comparison between their cultivation. But even so, the struggle for cultivation was still very important, because the level of cultivation could affect the level of future achievements. So, when they saw Yun Qingbai's Tao flame and the newly appeared Tao flame rise rapidly and reveal an unparalleled might, no matter if it was a peerlessly extraordinary freak of the ancient times like Saintess Lin Shui or one of the few peerless giants of the current era like Yi Mouve, all of them were unable to not be shocked and moved. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun also noticed Yun Qingbai's Tao fire. And Yun Qingbei also noticed Lin Sun's Tao fire. As if it was predestined, Lin Sun instantly concluded that the Tao fire must be Yun Qingbei's, because the qi it emitted made him feel disdain, pride, sharpness, and a unique charm. That kind of charm was as deep and immeasurable as the abyss. It could control the ups and downs and swallow the world. It's him. Lin Sun's black eyes burst out with a terrible divine light. His heart was in turmoil and endless waves emerged. The devil in the heart was everywhere. Almost every practitioner would become a devil in their heart because of their obsession with something. Killing Yun Qingbei was Lin Sun's obsession and his inner demon. If Yun Qingbei didn't die, it would be difficult to get rid of the devil in his heart. The absolute summit domain will be your burial place. Get rid of my devil in my heart, and I'll pay with my blood. Lin Sun murmured, an invisible killing intent lingered around him. In the end, the killing intent calmed down. And Lin Sun's tumbling mood gradually calmed down, and he was not shocked at all. He had been waiting for too long. How could his mind be affected? It seems that it's really him. Yun Qingbei originally planned to leave, but at this time, he stood there and stared at Lin Sun's Tao fire. In his heart, he thought of the scenes when he went to the mortal world. Who would have thought that an infant whose origin spirit vein was stolen would be able to achieve such accomplishments? What a surprise! Yun Qing's white robe fluttered in the wind. His expression was as indifferent as before, and even his state of mind was completely unperturbed. Yes, he was only slightly surprised. He didn't feel any shock or bewilderment after learning the truth, nor did he feel any sense of guilt. Lin Sun, Sun. You came to the ancient desolation realm to find me, didn't you? Yun Qingbei had his hands behind his back. His figure was like a sword, exuding a peerless and invincible aura. From the first time Yun Qingbei heard Lin Sun's name to now knowing Lin Sun's identity, Yun Qingbei didn't feel anything. Because even if Lin Sun was not the baby, he had already made up his mind to erase Lin Sun. The reason was simple, to wash away the shame of the sect. This was Yun Qingbei's attitude. Old enemy? Far from it. A baby that should have been dead wasn't worthy of becoming his enemy. In Zhou Su, 2 flames of the way shot into the sky, both above the other flames of the way. It was as if dragons and tigers were fighting for supremacy, and swords were clashing. They were all very strong. They were ridiculously powerful. This was the unanimous conclusion of other strong people who witnessed this scene. But who could surpass them, and who would be suppressed? This was something that no one could immediately determine. Even now, except for Yun Qingbei, very few people could see that the newly appeared flames of the way belonged to Lin Sun. At this moment, both Lin Sun and Yun Qingbei made the same action. They withdrew their gazes. They turned around. Then they left. From beginning to end, they didn't pay any attention to Zhou Su. For Lin Sun, no matter how powerful the flames of the way were, Yun Qingbei had to die. It was the same for Yun Qingbei. This was a tacit understanding. Even though they had never met, the two of them were able to vaguely sense each other's existence through the competition of the flames of the way. Although they didn't pay attention to it, it didn't mean that others didn't. And the result soon appeared. Boom! Yun Qingbai's flames of the way reached the highest point of Zhou Su, above everything, like a dominator. However, before everyone could react, Lin Sun's flames of the way rose to the highest point and stood side by side with Yun Qingbai's flames of the way. In an instant, all the strong people who were standing at the top of the ladder of heaven were shocked and in disbelief. Stand side by side? Who could surpass Yun Qingbai and stand on equal footing with him? Was it a talented ancient freak, or was it a heaven-defying genius of the present age? These doubts were destined to be unanswered, because soon a new change occurred. The flames of the way that represented Lin soon broke through the highest point and then disappeared. When they witnessed this scene, Saintess Lin Shui, Yi Mouv, and other strong people all opened their eyes wide and were completely shocked. How was this possible? They carefully sensed and finally determined that there were only 2,699 flames of the way above Zhou Su. Only the newly appeared one was missing. This had never happened before. Even in ancient times, when the apex domain had descended several times, there had never been such an unbelievable scene. 3,000 worlds, 3,000 places at the top of the ladder of heaven, and 3,000 flames of the way that were above Zhou Su. But today, because of the mysterious flames of the way, everything was overturned. In the current scene, Yun Qingbai's flames of the way were like the King of Kings, shining alone at the highest point of Zhou Su. Originally, this was enough to make the 3,000 worlds seethe with excitement and amaze countless cultivators. But when Lin Sun's flames of the way broke through the highest point of Zhou Su and disappeared, it made Yun Qingbai's flames of the way seem slightly inferior. Whose flames of the way belonged to? Why did it disappear? Many people were surprised and felt incredulous. Halfway up the ladder of heaven, Yun Qingbai seemed to sense something. He suddenly stopped and looked back at Zhou Su on the ladder of heaven. Disappeared? At this moment, Yun Qingbai, who had always been calm and exuded absolute disdain, showed a rare trace of absent-mindedness. Then, he withdrew his gaze and walked down the ladder of heaven without saying a word. No one knew that at this moment, he was even more determined to kill Lin Sun. At the very least, he could not tolerate Lin Sun walking out of the domain of the absolute summit. When I become a king, if you don't come, I will go find you. When he walked out of the tower of the absolute summit and looked at the dazzling light outside, 4 words appeared in Yun Qingbai's mind. There are no 2 suns in the sky. I didn't expect this guy to really do it. Qi Yao's expression was complicated as she watched the lonely and unshakable figure walk down from the top of the ladder of heaven. She had seen everything before. Because she did not stand at the top of the ladder of heaven, she did not see the scene of the 3,000 flames of the way fighting above Zhou Su. But even so, she still felt indescribably shocked. From the 1,000th step of the ladder of heaven, he fought his way to the top and experienced 1,000 battles. From the beginning to the end, he did not stop even once. This had always seemed like an impossible miracle. Even with Qi Yao's pride, she did not dare to say that she could do this. Therefore, when she saw Lin Sun, who was covered with blood and scars, walking down the stairs, her pure and bright face looked very complicated. There was fear, respect, surprise, shock. There were many other emotions. If it was possible, Qi Yao would attack without hesitation. But she knew that she had no chance. Not to mention whether or not Lin Sun still had the ability to fight, the ladder of heaven was already limited by the power of rules. It was impossible for cultivators to fight each other while climbing the ladder of heaven. Congratulations, brother. You are the leader among your peers in the celestial burning world. I'm afraid no one can shake or surpass your ranking. When Lin Sun's figure approached, Qi Yao took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the surging emotions in her heart. She revealed a smile so bright that even the world dimmed. You still plan to be my enemy? Lin Sun's body was very numb and he was exhausted to the extreme. Only a trace of consciousness remained clear, so when he spoke, his voice was hoarse and low. Even his eyes were empty, indifferent, and numb. But such words and eyes made Qi Yao stiff all over. She smiled a little unnaturally and said, "Let's talk about this kind of annoying problem later. Take care." After saying this, Lin Sun went straight down and never looked back. He did not pay attention to the changes in Zhou Shuzhong at the top of the ladder of heaven. He also did not pay attention to Qi Yao's uncertain expression. Watching Lin Sun's figure gradually disappear, Qi Yao's expression became cold, and she gave a cold snort. But then she sighed faintly and her heart was heavy. She knew that it was doomed to be very unwise to be enemies with Lin Sun in the same realm. She also knew that if she wanted to suppress Lin Sun, she had to step into the king realm before him and absolutely kill him with the strength of a realm higher. Otherwise, the hope was doomed to be slim. When Lin Sun walked down the ladder of heaven, an invisible and obscure force wrapped around him. Then, he could clearly feel all the power he had consumed when climbing the ladder of heaven, as well as his essence, qi, and spirit that had long been exhausted, all recovered in an instant. At the same time, everything went black in front of him. When he woke up, he had appeared in the gate of the apex tower. Except for the blood stains on his clothes, there was no trace of injury on Lin Sun's body. He was full of spirit, qi, and spirit. The abundant and vast power was surging in his body, which was exactly the same as the peak state before entering the apex tower. Lin Sun was not surprised. Every practitioner would experience such a recovery after passing the ladder of heaven. Yun Qi Bai, from today on, the gap between you and me no longer exists. Walking out of the apex tower, Lin Sun's heart was unprecedentedly calm. This strange encounter allowed him to experience 1,000 battles and witness different paths towards the Tao. He'd verified his own Tao, and he'd completely confirmed some things. P.S. These 2 or 3 chapters are a little difficult to write. Sorry to keep you waiting. Chapter 1184. He's out. There was a commotion outside the Tower of Apex. Countless eyes were fixed on Lin Sun, who was walking out of the tower. After learning that Lin Sun was going through the ladder of heaven today, the entire ancient city of immortals was in an uproar, and countless cultivators had gathered here. Therefore, when Lin Sun walked out, he saw that the nearby area was densely packed with cultivators, a sea of people. It was spectacular. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel surprised. It was also at this time that Lin Sun realized that his every move had become the focus of attention of many cultivators. This could also be called a kind of prestige. Lin Sun was lost in thought. "Child Lin, may I ask you a question? What's your result this time?" Someone plucked up the courage to ask cautiously. As soon as this question came out, everyone present immediately pricked up their ears. Lin Sun smiled and said casually, "From today on, I'm looking forward to someone being able to push me down the ranking. If anyone can do it, I'll treat him to a drink." Everyone present was in an uproar. This sentence seemed to be said casually, but it undoubtedly proved that demon god Lin had reached the top of the ladder of heaven, and he could no longer surpass him. Just like the first place, he could only wait to be surpassed. Congratulations, Child Lin. From today on, Child Lin will be respected among millions of peers in the immortals world. Sounds of congratulations rose and fell like tidewater, and they resounded through the heavens and the earth in this area. At this time, Lin Sun had already walked away. Wherever he passed, no matter who it was, they all retreated and made way for him with more or less admiration and respect on their faces. This man's prestige is like the sun, shining alone in this city. Among the peers, who can compare with him? In the distance, Luo Chuan and others from the ancient underworld Taoist sect saw this scene with their own eyes. They were shocked, but their faces were extremely gloomy. Lin Sun had a conflict with them when he went up the tower before. But now, Luo Chuan and others had extinguished the thought of revenge, and they just hated the great forces in the city more and more. If these great forces didn't deliberately conceal the truth and instigate them to control the Tower of Apex, how could they have a conflict with demon god Lin? Let's go find those guys who kill with a borrowed knife and seek justice. Luo Chuan gritted his teeth, feeling extremely aggrieved. Being used as a tool and inadvertently offending a great enemy was something he could not tolerate. However, when they arrived at the places where those great powers were entrenched and intended to demand an explanation, they discovered that the leaders of those great powers were not there. Soon, they learned that these major factions had gathered together to seek Fiend Celestial Lin's forgiveness. It was very likely that they were waiting in front of the hall where Fiend Celestial Lin resided. This caused Luo Chuan and the others to be stunned. What was going on? Let's go take a look. Luo Chuan made a prompt decision and led everyone into action. In front of the ancient palace. At this moment, there were over 10 figures waiting there. There were both men and women amongst them, and all of them were like dragons and phoenixes amongst men. They possessed extraordinary bearings, and even though they were young in appearance, they possessed an extremely dignified aura. All of them were the leaders of the younger generation of the various great powers. They were either absolute giants or ancient freaks. In the past, any one of them would be able to shock an entire region. But at this moment, they were waiting in front of the hall, restraining their pride and waiting quietly. Occasionally, there was a flash of worry between their eyebrows. Before Lin Sun entered the Tower of Apex, he had said that if they didn't give him a satisfactory answer, he wouldn't mind paying them a visit one by one. Obviously, Lin Sun had seen through their intention to kill with a borrowed knife and watch the tigers fight. These great powers couldn't sit still at once. They wouldn't forget that just a while ago, Lin Sun directly wiped out the Golden Crow Branch, Xuandu Taoism School, Sea Spirit Clan and other forces. Some died and some fled. It was a tragic sight. Under such circumstances, how could these great powers not panic when Lin Sun said that he would pay them a visit? They didn't want to be expelled from the ancient city of immortals like the Golden Crow Branch and other forces. Therefore, before Lin Sun walked out of the Tower of Apex, the leaders of these great powers gathered together to offer a humble apology. Although this was very shameful and not in line with their status and dignity, there was no other way. Who asked them to offend such a ruthless person as Fiend Celestial Lin? In fact, they were also depressed and wronged. From the beginning to the end, they didn't do anything. They just wanted to see the conflict between those foreign forces and Fiend Celestial Lin. How could disaster fall from the sky? Was it also a mistake not to warn those foreign forces about the dreadfulness of Fiend Celestial Lin? Of course, they could only endure this grievance. In the ancient city of immortals, they would rather offend Yama than Fiend Celestial Lin. Not long after, Lin Sun came back. When he saw this scene, he was stunned at first, but then he understood and a cold smile appeared on his lips. He didn't say much and went straight to the hall where he lived. But this made those men and women panic, and they all came up to him. Taoism Peer Lin, I'm Zhou Qinyun, the successor of Star Wonderland. Because of some misunderstanding, I've made you unhappy. I'm here to apologize. Please forgive me. Brother Lin, I'm the successor of Five Elements Palace. Child Lin, please wait. All of a sudden, Lin Sun was surrounded. These arrogant and conceited geniuses, who were revered wherever they went, were now meek and submissive. They had ashamed and apologetic expressions on their faces as they took the initiative to bow their heads in apology. Such a scene was absolutely rare in the past. If it was spread out, it was bound to become a hot topic in the streets and alleys. When Luo Chuan and the other successors of ancient underworld Taoism sect arrived, they happened to see this scene, and they all opened their eyes wide. It wasn't difficult to make ordinary people admire and fear them, but it was too difficult to make all the leaders of different forces apologize at the same time, and all of them had to lower their heads submissively. Is it fun to kill with a borrowed knife? Lin Sun glanced at the crowd indifferently. These men and women looked a little embarrassed and hesitated. Although they felt very uncomfortable, they could only endure it. If you see me as your enemy, then do it openly. If you only use some tricks in the dark, I'll look down on you. Lin Sun said coldly. It was easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against a stab in the dark. Now there was less than half a year to go to the upper 9 realms, and he didn't want to waste his energy on guarding against such things. Lin Sun's words made these men and women stiff all over, and they almost broke out in a cold sweat. They hurriedly promised that it would never happen again. The farce came to an end. But Lin Sun knew that these forces might be bowing their heads now, but when the upper 9 realms opened and the real battle for hegemony began, they wouldn't mind biting him hard as long as there was a chance. He knew the minds of the successors of these forces too well. They bowed their heads at this time because they were afraid of his power in the ancient city of immortal burning. Once the situation changed, they would regard today's action as a disgrace, and they were bound to find opportunities to make trouble for him. Unless he could suppress them like this all the time. From this day on, Lin Sun lived in seclusion again, intending to take advantage of the opening of the passage to the upper 9 realms to improve his immortality Tao to another level. All he needed was an opportunity to reach the peak of the King realm. Time went by, and a month passed in the blink of an eye. The ancient city of immortal burning became more and more lively. Almost every day, there were practitioners from other realms crossing over to enter the upper 9 realms with the help of the pavilion on the top of the ancient city of immortal burning. The reason for this was simple. In the 3,000 dimensions, even though the apex pavilions in every single world possessed 1,000 positions to enter the upper 9 realms, it must be known that there were millions of cultivators in every single world, so it was obvious how brutal the competition was. Moreover, there were many great forces in some realms, just like there were too many flood dragons in a pond. In order to survive, some flood dragons who thought they were weak could only go to other ponds to seek opportunities. However, all the foreign forces who entered the immortal burning realm didn't dare to act recklessly when they learned of Lin Sun's existence and the bloody things he had done. At least, things like the ancient underworld Taoism sect blocking the pavilion on the top never happened again. There were also some foreign practitioners who were not convinced, but when they learned that Lin Sun had stood at the top of the ladder of heaven, and no one could shake him, they immediately gave up the idea of making trouble for Lin Sun. The changes in the outside world had nothing to do with Lin Sun. During this month of time, Lin Sun had relied on the heart control and Tao from Qian You's heart to smoothly attain perfection in his comprehension of the undying Tao insight. He was only a step away from breaking through to the Tao truth realm. Another month later, he went. Right when Lin Sun broke through to the Tao truth realm with the undying Tao insight, a group of foreign cultivators walked out from the pavilion on the top. The person in the lead was a young man whose entire body was bathed in black lightning. He wore dark armor, and every single strand of his hair was coiled with terrifying arcs of jet black lightning, causing him to possess peerless might. A group of men and women surrounded him like a host of stars surrounding the bright moon. "Tell me where that bastard Lin Sun is." As soon as he appeared, the young man in dark armor stretched out his hand and grabbed a cultivator from afar, and he asked with an indifferent voice, He's. The cultivator was terrified to the point his soul almost left his body, and he spoke with a trembling voice of Lin Sun's residence. Bang! The young man in dark armor tossed the cultivator away like he was tossing trash. After that, his scarlet-red eyes suddenly locked onto a building that was far away, and he said, "Come, let's go meet this little bastard." Swoosh! His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when his figure transformed into a black bolt of lightning that rumbled as it tore through the sky and flashed towards the distance. The others followed closely behind him when they saw this. They were moving in a threatening manner. In the distance, many cultivators witnessed this scene, and their expressions couldn't help but change. What's going on? There are actually people who dare to cross dimensions to look for trouble with Fiend Godlin? Those with good intentions don't come, and those who come with ill intent. These people were so domineering. As soon as they arrived, they immediately took action and targeted Fiend Godlin, and this was extremely shocking. They're experts of the Black Nightmare Dog Clan. Chapter 1185. The Black Nightmare Tengu race's experts had come to attack, and their target was Fiend Celestial Lin. Countless cultivators were in an uproar in the city of Immortal Burning as soon as the news came out. It's Go Yandong of the Black Demon Dog Clan. Soon, the identity of the young man in black armor bathed in black lightning was seen through, and it caused quite a stir. He was a ruthless man. He was a top figure of the same generation as Yun Qinbai, Yi Mouv, Wang Xuanyu, and Mi Hengzhen. He was second to none. However, no one expected Go Yandong to have the courage to attack the city of Immortal Burning. Did he really think Demon God Lin was easy to bully? Let's go and have a look. There's really someone who dares to challenge Demon God Lin. There's going to be a good show. In the discussion, many practitioners had already rushed to the palace where Lin soon lived. In front of the ancient palace, Go Yandong and his group stood there without concealing their killing intent, causing the area to be filled with a murderous aura. At the same time, many cultivators appeared and watched from afar. However, they looked at Go Yandong and his group with a trace of surprise. In the city of Immortal Burning now, not to mention ordinary cultivators, even the top figures and ancient freaks of great forces dared not provoke Demon God Lin for fear of drawing trouble to themselves. But this group of Black Demon Dog Clan experts had just walked out of the Tower of Apex, and they directly attacked without any hesitation. This seemed very domineering, but also very arrogant and presumptuous. In the eyes of many cultivators, Go Yandong and his group were no different from courting death. Is little bastard Lin Sun here? Come out and accept your death. A silver-robed man beside Go Yandong shouted with great momentum. His voice was like a clap of thunder that resounded in the world. However, what made him frown was that the expressions of the cultivators nearby had become very strange. There was no reaction of agitation or shock. Big brother, are these idiots scared out of their wits? The silver-robed man was stunned. Go Yandong noticed that the atmosphere was slightly strange as well, but he didn't mind it, and he said indifferently, Devil God Lin once annihilated the disciples of many powers in this city. Perhaps these cultivators subconsciously think that our actions seem to be slightly rash. Since you know that, why did all of you still come to throw away your lives? A voice sounded out from the crowd in the distance, and it carried a trace of confusion. How dare you? The silver-robed man's face immediately darkened, and his eyes revealed a murderous glint. Go Yandong stopped him and said indifferently, Summer insects cannot speak of ice. Why bother with a bunch of mediocre people? It's a disgrace to your identity. After that, his scarlet-red eyes sized up the hall before him, and he said, It was difficult for us to have a chance to deal with that kid in the outside world. But now that we know he's hiding in the immortal incineration dimension, we naturally have to annihilate him. His words were casual, but they were filled with incomparable conceit and arrogance. However, the gazes of the crowd in the distance grew even more strange. It was like they were staring at an idiot, and there was no lack of pity, sympathy, and pleasure in Chen Shi's misfortune. This caused Go Yandong to be unable to help but frown, and then his expression became indifferent and icy cold. Were these idiots really afraid of Demon God Lin? So you heard that Demon God Lin is in this dimension, and that's why you rushed over to take revenge. But are you sure you want to do that? Someone in the distance spoke. Why can't we do that? Go Yandong's face darkened. Everything that had happened today was too strange. The reactions of the spectators were also very abnormal, as if they were pitying them. But since when did he, Go Yandong, need to be pitied by others? These short-sighted frogs at the bottom of a well. It was one thing for them to be afraid of demon god Lin, but now they even dared to judge others by their own standards and pity them. It was simply detestable. Friends, I advise you to reconsider. Someone in the crowd sighed, and he seemed to be persuading them with kind words. This made Go Yandong somewhat unable to bear it. He was a great powerhouse of the Black Nightmare Tengu clan. In the past, he was feared and feared wherever he went. When had he ever been looked down upon like this? Don't tell me all of you think that I, Go Yandong, am no match for demon god Lin? Go Yandong laughed out of extreme anger. His expression was cold, and terrifying black lightning surged around his body. He looked disdainful and intimidating. To his surprise, all the spectators present nodded in unison. Go Yandong was stunned, and so were the clansmen around him. This scene, it was simply making people vomit blood and go crazy. It was nothing to be despised by others, but to be despised by everyone and think that they were no match for demon god Lin was too exasperating. If Go Yandong hadn't tried his best to restrain his killing intent, he would have killed all the spectators present. It was too damn disappointing. Big brother, don't bother with these vulgar people. It's a disgrace to your identity. The silver-robed man next to him hurriedly persuaded him. Go Yandong's lips twitched. He had just reminded the silver-robed man, but he never thought that it would be used on him now. However, these vulgar guys were really exasperating. Go Yandong took a deep breath, and his scarlet eyes were surging with terrible killing intent. He said, "Today, I will cut off Lin Sun's head in front of you, who have eyes but fail to see." Instead of being shocked, everyone looked more and more sympathetic when they heard this. As the saying goes, good words can't persuade a damned ghost, and mercy can't save a man. Who could be blamed if he didn't listen to advice when he was courting death? Go Yandong couldn't stand this atmosphere at all. He suddenly looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. "Lin Sun, I know you are inside. I'll give you a chance. Get out, and I can let you die with dignity." His voice was like a tide, shaking the field. Many practitioners' eardrums were almost torn, their blood was boiling, and their faces changed. Some even cursed in exasperation, "Go to hell!" To be honest, Go Yandong was really about to go berserk. When had he been treated like this? No. The faces of the people around him were also extremely bad, and their eyes were about to burst into flames. At this moment, Lin Sun's voice came out, "I've been a vegetarian recently, and I don't want to eat meat. But you just send yourself to me. It's really surprising." Puff. Many people in the crowd couldn't help laughing. Go Yandong and others were already furious. They felt that they would die of anger if they continued to endure it. "You don't want to come? I'll go look for you." Go Yandong shouted loudly. Rumble. Jet black light surged explosively from his entire body while the rumble of wind and thunder resounded, and his imposing aura rose to a shocking state. Needless to say, Go Yandong was extremely formidable, and he could be considered to be at the top amongst the great figures. However, before he could make a move, a broken blade that was jade white like snow suddenly charged out from within the hall, and it floated in midair while emanating an illusory, dazzling, and resplendent edge. "I'll forgive all of your actions today if you're able to resist 3 strikes from me, but if you're unable to, then leave your lives behind." Amidst his indifferent voice, the broken blade in midair had already slashed down. Swoosh! It was like a bright silver river of stars had descended from the 9 heavens, and it was powerful, swift, and merely its murderous aura caused space to be blasted apart like a piece of cloth. In the beginning, Go Yandong's expression was gloomy, and he was exasperated. Does this fiend god Lin think I'm unable to resist even 3 strikes? He's going too far. But when the broken blade slashed down at this moment, his expression turned grim as he sensed the terrifying strength of this strike, and it caused the rage in his heart to instantly vanish before he became solemn and serious. As one of the great figures that possessed extremely abundant battle experience, Go Yandong instantly realized that this fiend god Lin was a formidable opponent indeed, and he couldn't be underestimated. Clang! Even though he thought like this in his heart, his movements weren't slow at all. A black spear soared into the sky while carrying dazzling black-colored lightning as it collided head-on with the broken blade. Clang! Sparks shot out from the collision of the two, and merely the sound of the collision caused the distant spectators to feel uncomfortable to the point they almost coughed up blood, and they couldn't help but be astounded. At the same time, the shock in Go Yandong's heart was even greater. Only when he truly collided with Chun did he realize how terrifying the strength of this slash was. It was like a torrential flood, a landslide, and a tsunami, simple, direct, and all-powerful. Instantly, he felt as if the skin on his entire body was about to explode, while the vital blood in his body surged and flowed in the opposite direction. His body trembled uncontrollably, and he almost knelt down from the strike. On the other hand, the black spear in his hand was even slashed to the point it was bent like a fully drawn bow, and it emitted an ear-piercing wail as if it was on the verge of being unable to endure it. It felt as if he was being crushed by an ancient divine mountain. The second slash. Lin Sun didn't seem to be surprised that this strike was blocked. As the broken blade swept up, its power changed abruptly, and its surface was suffused with obscure and dense Taoist markings. Shit! Go Yandong's scalp went numb, and he sensed a fatal danger, causing him to choose to dodge without hesitation. It wasn't that he wasn't strong enough. On the contrary, it was precisely because he was among the top magnates and possessed extremely rich combat experience that he was able to perceive the danger at the first possible moment. If it were any other practitioner, they probably wouldn't even have such a reaction. Puff. However, even though Go Yandong had reacted in the first possible moment, he still underestimated the terror of this strike. In an instant, life and death appeared. A bloody crack was cut open on his back, and his internal organs were severely injured. His entire upper body was almost cut open directly. Clatter, a rain of scarlet and hot blood poured down. Go Yandong let out a shrill scream, and his face instantly turned ghastly pale. The practitioners watching in the distance were very sure that Go Yandong was probably no match for Lin Sun. But when they saw Go Yandong, who was one of the top magnates in the present age, was seriously injured and almost cut in half with just the second strike, they were so shocked that they felt a chill all over. Demon Lin was too fierce, wasn't he? At the same time, the men and women around Go Yandong all widened their eyes in disbelief and disbelief. Previously, when Go Yandong was injured, they didn't even have time to react, let alone rescue him. "Let's go!" Go Yandong roared. He realized that compared with before, Demon Lin, this malignant star, was like a different person. He had become stronger, and he had seriously underestimated this opponent from the very beginning. He finally understood why those spectators looked so pitiful and didn't think highly of them. It wasn't intentional contempt, but they obviously knew how powerful Demon Lin was. At the thought of this, Go Yandong wanted to slap himself. If he had known this earlier, he wouldn't have rushed here in such a hurry. At least, he should have figured out Demon Lin's strength before taking action. Unfortunately, it was useless to regret now. He could only flee. PS1. Good words can't persuade a damned ghost. Compassion doesn't save those who commit suicide. This was a warning from CCTV News regarding the border issue in India. It was especially domineering. PS2. The purpose of writing this chapter is to make everyone compare it with the scene of Yun Qin by suppressing the ancient freak Shurjintong with 3 swords, and to illustrate Lin Sun's combat strength. Chapter 1186. After suffering a heavy injury, Go Yandong was still able to think of escaping at the first possible moment. Many practitioners were amazed by his prompt reaction. There was no doubt that Go Yandong was really strong. Unfortunately, he encountered Lin Sun this time. The third slash. At the same time as he fled, the broken blade slashed down again, flickering and changing like a variable of the Great Way. The impermanence slash. No one could capture the trace of this slash. Firstly, it was too swift. Secondly, the profundities contained within this slash were truly too obscure, miraculous, and profound. It was profound like the profundities of the Grand Tao, and it was impossible to describe. Puff! His head fell to the ground. Then, blood spurted out. In the end, Go Yandong's headless body crashed to the ground. There was a dead silence between the heaven and the earth. Amidst the silence, an awe-inspiring atmosphere pervaded the air. A top figure who had been famous for a long time had died just like that? The spectators were in a trance, and their minds were shocked by this bloody scene. What shocked them even more was that from the beginning to the end, they didn't see how the third slash was executed. Seeing this, the silver-robed man and the other black demon dog clan widened their eyes, and their minds twitched fiercely. They felt dizzy. Go Yandong was only one step away from reaching the King realm. He was a peerless figure that was unanimously favored by their clans. But before he could enter the upper 9 realms, he was killed in the dark. Some ancient freaks and peerless figures of some great forces were horrified and had goosebumps when they saw this. What kind of slash was this? Even they felt a suffocating and fatal threat. There was no doubt that even they might not be able to resist this slash. No! After a long while, the silver-robed man and the others woke up from the shock and let out screams and roars of anger. The silent atmosphere was broken. The spectators seemed to wake up from a dream and let out a long breath of turbid air. The scene just now was as unreal as a nightmare. It made them more and more aware of how terrifying Lin Sun was. At this moment, when they looked at the silver-robed man and the others again, there was not only pity in their eyes, but also a kind of sorrow. Why did he court death in the past? The eyes of the silver-robed man and the others almost split apart from rage. They were panic-stricken and helpless, and they didn't hesitate at all to directly choose to flee. But as the broken blades flickered, their bodies fell to the ground one after another. Thud, thud, thud sounds rang out incessantly. They were all executed. Blood flowed on the ground. Right at this moment, Lin Sun's figure walked out of the hall. He raised his hand and waved. Clang! The broken blade transformed into a ray of light and vanished between his eyebrows. Everyone, if there are such ignorant fools coming to attack us in the future, please don't try to persuade them. I'd like to know who else can't wait to stand up and deal with me. Lin Sun's black eyes glanced around and cupped his hands. The spectators' hearts trembled. Did demon god Lin feel that he hadn't had his fill of killing? With this thought in mind, their actions were not slow. They all nodded or patted their chests in agreement. Seeing this, Lin Sun cupped his hands again and put away the bodies of Go Yandong and others quickly. Then he turned and walked into the hall. Not long after, a unique and alluring barbecued meat aroma wafted out of the hall, causing one's mouth to water. This fiend celestial Lin is truly unrestrained. Many practitioners gasped in astonishment. In particular, some creatures like divine birds and spiritual beasts were scared. If they offended demon god Lin, they would not only die miserably, but also be eaten. In the hall, Lin Sun was thinking about the previous 3 strikes while roasting the golden and oily black dog leg. After a while, he shook his head. Perhaps Go Yandong was a top figure among the contemporary giants, but he was no longer a threat to Lin Sun. There was nothing to write home about when fighting with him. If Lin Sun wanted to kill Go Yandong before, he only needed 1 strike. Water, fire, immortality, true dragon, and star obliteration. The 5 great ways had all reached the level of Tao truth, which was the limit that could be comprehended and controlled by the 5 realms. The higher realm of Tao rule was the power that could only be controlled by those who had reached the King realm. Tao rule was the law of Tao rule. To advance to the King realm, one had to comprehend the law of King Wei. Because it involved the pursuit of longevity, it could also be called the law of longevity. But these were not what Lin Sun needed to consider now. In the following days, Lin soon began to meditate on the impermanence cut. This cut was extremely mysterious and obscure, involving the variables of Tao. Although it was just a cut, it contained thousands of mysteries. With Lin Sun's comprehension and the power of mind controlling and Tao linking, it was difficult for him to understand its meaning. Every time he comprehended it, he benefited a lot. This made Lin Sun think that if he could thoroughly understand the impermanence cut and master all the mysteries of the 6 strikes of Tian Yuan, the power of this inheritance might really be exerted. While Lin Sun was concentrating on his cultivation, the outside world was also changing. As the time for the opening of the upper 9 realms was getting closer and closer, the competition in the Tower of the Top became more and more fierce and cruel. Every day there were people who ranked in the top 1,000. At the same time, some strong people who originally ranked in the top 1,000 were squeezed out. Under such frequent elimination, it was conceivable that the strong who could finally rank in the top 1,000 must be the elite of the elite, the strongest of the strong. But no matter how the ranking changed, the top 10 could rarely be shaken, and Lin Sun, who ranked first, had never been shaken at all. This was amazing and made people more aware of Lin Sun's terror. The competition in the Tower of the Top was in full swing, not only in the realm of burning immortals, but also in the entire 3,000 realms. It can be foreseen that only 2 kinds of people can go to the upper 9 realms. One is to be promoted to the king, and the second is to be ranked in the top 1,000 of the Tao celestial ladder. The competition in the upper 9 realms is destined to be a struggle for the top figures of the 3,000 realms. Whoever can set foot in the king realm will have an advantage. On the contrary, the top figures who have not set foot in the king realm and are stuck in the reincarnation development realm will encounter an unprecedented crisis. Many cultivators came to a unanimous conclusion. The situation is not optimistic for Demon Lin. Some people were surprised to find that Demon Lin might be invincible among his peers in the realm of burning immortals, but once he went to the upper 9 realms, the situation would become dangerous. For example, the successors of those orthodoxies were protected by their peers who had just been promoted to the king level, so they would not be threatened too much. But Demon Lin, who was alone, not only did he not have such protection, but he also had many enemies. When he reached the upper 9 realms, his situation was bound to be more dangerous than others. Don't worry, a person like Demon Lin is not destined to be killed so easily. Think about it, he has encountered many dangers over the years. But didn't he turn misfortune into blessing every time? Some people were very confident in Lin Sun. Rising through the trials of blood and fire, transforming through the trials of life and death. Perhaps this is the path that Demon Lin wants to take, and also the reason why he can constantly become stronger. Some people were deep in thought. Since Go Yandong and his group were killed, in the following days, many foreign forces came across the realms to kill Lin Sun. But when they heard about Lin Sun's various deeds, these aggressive experts eventually left with their tails between their legs. Most of these forces had old grudges against Lin Sun. For example, the Heavens Pivot Holy Land, the vast Sea Taoist sect, the Pure Land of Longevity, the Green Phoenix clan, the Sea Shark clan, and so on. They had all heard about Lin Sun's appearance in the immortal burning realm, so they had come in large numbers, trying to find an opportunity to kill Lin Sun. However, when they arrived at the immortal burning realm and learned about Lin Sun's various performances in the past year, they suddenly realized that something was wrong and had to retreat. The reason was that Lin Sun was already invincible among his peers, so no one was willing to risk their lives at such a time. After all, seizing the opportunity to become a king was the most important thing. It would be a great misfortune if they lost the opportunity to become a king because of an accident while fighting with Lin Sun. As long as they weren't fools, they would know how to choose. Big news! Bai Longting, the ancient freak of the White Flood Dragon bloodline, has triggered a peerless king's tribulation in the green illusion dimension and successfully stepped into the peak of the king realm. On this day, when Lin Sun woke up from his meditation, he heard the big news that was spreading rapidly on the streets of the city, causing a great sensation. It was hard not to pay attention to it. Bai Longting, so it's him. Lin Sun recalled that Mi Heng had accepted Bai Longting's challenge during the Thousand Flow Grand meeting. However, he hadn't expected that this ancient freak from the White Flood Dragon bloodline would actually step foot into the peak of the King realm in the 3,000 worlds. It's the 13th already. Lin Sun pondered silently. During this period of time, similar news about peak experts becoming kings had been occurring successively. From Qi Lingxiao, who was the first to step foot into the peak of the King realm, to Bai Longting, 13 peak experts had been born in the 3,000 world. This was already known. As for whether someone had stepped foot into this realm in secret, no one could say for sure. This news naturally didn't affect Lin Sun. However, to his surprise, practically all 13 people who had advanced into the peak of the King realm were ancient freaks. This was the accumulation of resources. Lin Sun had no choice but to admit that when compared to these ancient freaks, the figures of the current era lacked nothing but the accumulation of resources. Because most of these ancient freaks had entered the apex domain in the ancient times, wandered through the 3,000 worlds, and even entered the upper 9 realms. Their understanding and cognition of the apex domain couldn't be compared by the figures of the current era. For example, the old toad had already locked in a great fortune in the Fenshan Valley before he entered the apex domain. He didn't need to explore painstakingly like other practitioners. He had an absolute advantage innately. It was conceivable that other ancient freaks like the old toad must be the same. Don't worry. My path has nothing to do with fortune or opportunity. I only lack an opportunity, and it's coming soon, Lin Sun murmured in his heart. Recently, when he was meditating, he often had a strong premonition, as if on a whim, that the opportunity that belonged to him to be promoted to a king was coming soon. This was an extremely mysterious feeling, which came from the heart and was wonderful beyond words. Chapter 1187. However, what Lin Sun didn't expect was that the opportunity to become a king didn't come, but the time to open the upper 9 realms came on this day. In the 3,000 realms, the pavilion of the apex shone brilliantly, and the invisible power of rules and order spread out. In the pavilion of the apex, the great way ladder turned into a passage, leading to the deepest part of the universe. On this day, the 3,000 realms were shocked and countless cultivators were excited. From the arrival of the absolute nightmare domain to the opening of the passage to the upper 9 realms, it had been exactly 1 year. Too many soul-stirring things had happened in this 1 year. Some people died. Some people became kings. Some people rose and obtained the fortune and opportunity they wanted. Some people, but from today onwards, everything would undergo earth-shattering changes. Those who ranked in the top 1,000 of the pavilion of the apex will go to the upper 9 realms to seize greater and more heaven-defying fortune. Others can only look at it and sigh. They don't have the chance to go there, and can only wander in the 3,000 realms. The gap will be completely separated today. Many people were sighing with emotion. The upper 9 realms was a place of competition for the top figures, a battlefield for thousands of talents, and a stage for kings to compete for supremacy. Others were not qualified to enter at all. This was the gap. In other words, it was a kind of invisible elimination. What a pity! It was undoubtedly a heavy blow to some self-proclaimed geniuses and geniuses who couldn't get the qualification to enter the upper 9 realms. In the upper 9 realms, the competition for the heavenly golden list will appear. Doesn't this mean that we don't even have the qualification to compete? These strong people looked gloomy and felt frustrated. It was known to the world that only those who ranked in the heavenly golden list were qualified to be called real, heavenly talents. The difference of one step is like the difference between heaven and earth. The cruelty of the Great Way can be seen here. At this moment, in the 3,000 realms, there were countless sighs, melancholy, resentment, and helplessness. Some people even cried bitterly for this. It was difficult for non-real cultivators to understand the helplessness of not being able to see the peak of the realm. In contrast, those who were qualified to enter the upper 9 realms were full of ambition and excitement. The search for the Great Way was only for today. Let's go. In the golden underworld, Yun Qingbai was the first to enter the pavilion of the apex. Depart. Sister Zizhen and Yen Zhanqiu's eyes flashed like lightning as they strode forward. The upper 9 realms, the heaven-defying land of fortune that has been sealed since ancient times, has it all been opened? Saintess Lin Shui murmured. This time, I shall reign supreme and suppress all my peers. In the wilderness, a young man with an ordinary appearance and an incomparably low profile suddenly transformed into a golden-winged roc, and he revealed a peerlessly ferocious aura as he swiftly vanished. In different regions of the 3,000 worlds, one after another, the peerless figures began to move towards the upper 9 realms. A similar scene was playing out in the immortal burning realm. The crowd surged before the pavilion of absolute apex. Numerous dazzling experts walked into the pavilion of absolute apex under the gazes of envy and reverence. If one observed carefully, one would notice that practically all these experts were from the various sects of the Grand Tao. There were absolute giants of the current generation. There were also ancient freaks. Outside the city, some experts who had long since advanced to the king level also began to take action. These king-level experts only needed to soar into the sky above the pavilion of absolute apex and use their king-level nomological powers to be guided into the passageway to the upper 9 realms. Where's demon god Lin? What puzzled everyone was that Lin Sun was the only one missing at such a time. As the number 1 on the Great Path Heavenly Stairway, Lin Sun, who had not been shaken in the slightest, did not appear on such a day that attracted worldwide attention. This was undoubtedly too strange. Does he not intend to go to the upper 9 realms? Someone joked. Stop talking nonsense. How can we guess Demon Godlin's thoughts? No matter what, he will definitely go to the upper 9 realms. Suddenly, a thunderous roar resounded in the sky amidst the discussions. Lin Sun, the Golden Crow lineage will be waiting for you in the upper 9 realms. The voice was bone-chilling and filled with boundless hatred. Everyone looked up and saw a black-robed young man standing proudly in the sky. His entire body emitted king-level pressure. It was Wu Yuanjun of the Golden Crow lineage. Previously, he had suppressed Lin Sun in front of the city gate. Everyone's hearts trembled. Demon God Lin had not even entered the upper 9 realms, but he had already been firmly targeted. Blood for blood, Demon God Lin, come to the upper 9 realms if you have the guts. You'd better wash your neck and wait. The upper 9 realms won't give you the chance to be a coward anymore. On the other side of the sky, Miao Tsun of the Xuandu Daoist sect, Shang Chong of the Sea Soul clan, Wang Yuntong of the moon-worshipping cult, and other king-level powerhouses all spoke coldly. During this period of time, they had been blocked outside the immortal incineration ancient city. One could imagine how aggrieved they were. Now that the passageway to the upper 9 realms had opened, they could no longer tolerate it. Before they left behind such harsh words. There was a dead silence. Everyone was shocked. Demon God Lin did not make a move to the upper 9 realms now. Was it because he had expected such a scene? Haha, remember what I said. When I become a king-level powerhouse, it will be the time of your death. Suddenly, a chuckle sounded. Everyone turned their heads in unison and saw that Lin Sun had already appeared on the roof of the palace where he resided. He was holding a roasted black dog leg and was gorging on it. He had a leisurely demeanor, as if the king-level powerhouses in the sky were nothing. He had appeared. There was a commotion in the field. No one had expected that Demon God Lin would still be as powerful as before at such a time. Evil creature, you still want to become a king-level powerhouse? Do you think I'll give you a chance later? Wu Yuanzhen laughed loudly. His voice was like the cry of an owl, piercing one's eardrums. His words made many people sigh in their hearts. Indeed, Demon God Lin was still not a king-level powerhouse. As long as he entered the upper 9 realms, who would watch him become a king-level powerhouse? It could be foreseen that before he became a king-level powerhouse, he was destined to suffer the cruelest pursuit of these major forces. Let's go. What's the point of talking to someone who's about to die? In the sky, the group of king-level powerhouses sneered and withdrew their gazes. They ignored Lin Sun and leaped into the passage leading to the upper 9 realms, disappearing. At this time, Lin Sun got up lazily and threw away the bone in his hand. Then he waved to the crowd in the distance, "Stop looking. I still have something to do. I won't leave now." With that, his figure flashed and disappeared. Something to do? I think he's afraid of being besieged as soon as he enters the upper 9 realms, so he doesn't dare to leave, a descendant of a major force muttered. Immediately, he was reprimanded by his peers. "Shut up! Do you want to cause trouble for our sect?" As a descendant of a major force, not everyone was qualified to enter the upper 9 realms. In other words, the major forces in the city would still linger in the immortal burning realm, using it as a base to continue to explore and seek opportunities in the immortal burning realm. At this time, as long as Lin Sun didn't leave the city, these major forces would not dare to take him lightly. The passage is only open for a month. I don't believe that Demon Lin will stay here, unless he really doesn't plan to go to the upper 9 realms. Some descendants of the major forces sneered secretly. The situation had changed. In the past, they could only endure because they were afraid of Demon Lin. But everyone knew that Demon Lin would leave eventually. Who would have any scruples and fear? What was more, in the upper 9 realms, there were many people who wanted to kill Demon Lin. Almost on the same day, almost all the strong people in the immortal burning realm who were qualified to enter the upper 9 realms left. 7 days later, in the immortal burning ancient city, it was almost impossible to find anyone who wanted to go to the upper 9 realms. Even those who had been promoted to king-level powerhouses had left the immortal burning realm from outside the city one after another. But to everyone's surprise, 7 days had passed, and there was no sign of Lin Sun going to the upper 9 realms. Was he really afraid? Was he worried that he would encounter unpredictable dangers after entering the upper 9 realms? Or was he waiting for something? That night, a group of figures walked stealthily into the city gate. However, as soon as they entered the city, they were stunned. They saw that the road ahead had been blocked by a lonely figure. "Oh no, it's Demon Lin!" Suddenly, someone screamed. At the same time, Lin Sun also smiled. "I knew you bastards couldn't help but want to enter the city. Do you think I can't protect myself and won't miss you anymore? Run!" Those figures were so scared that their souls almost flew out of their bodies. They turned around and fled out of the city. However, Lin Sun had already taken action. With the hegemonic prohibition, the invisible power of prohibition spread, and these figures were immediately imprisoned. Then, their bodies exploded one after another, and blood poured down. They died on the spot. Lin Sun waved his sleeves, and the sea of consciousness and blood on the ground were all evaporated, as if nothing had happened just now. These practitioners were the descendants of the major forces who escaped from the city when Lin Sun carried out the massacre. With Lin Sun in charge, they had never dared to enter the city. Naturally, it was impossible for them to have the opportunity to enter the Apex Tower, so they lost the chance to enter the upper 9 realms. Among these major forces, almost all those who had been promoted to kings had left. The rest were the descendants who had not become kings and were not qualified to enter the upper 9 realms. They had thought that the situation had changed and Lin Sun would leave sooner or later, so he had no time to care about them. So they boldly planned to enter the city. Who would have thought that as soon as they entered the city, they would be blocked and suffer? Lin Sun's eyes were deep. He quietly looked outside the city gate, but he didn't go out in the end. Instead, he turned around and left. This guy is so treacherous. Not long after Lin Sun left, several figures appeared in the night outside the city, each of them exuding a powerful king's power. What should we do? He neither goes to the upper 9 realms nor leaves the city. Some baits that went to the city just now were killed by him. Do we have to wait like this? Someone's voice was low, full of unwillingness and hatred. He has been vigilant for a long time. He is destined not to leave the city. In this case, it's useless for us to wait here. Then let's go. Let's do it. On the streets of the city, Lin Sun wandered alone at a leisurely pace. Not long after, he seemed to perceive something. He looked up at the sky and saw figures full of king's power leaving one by one. It seems that I really have to kill them all. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold and deep. Who could imagine that in order to deal with Lin Sun, there were so many strong people in the king realm lurking outside the city? Lin Sun didn't need to think at all to know that these people must be from the great forces such as Golden Crow. Chapter 1188. The Tower of the Apex became more and more deserted. The ladder of heaven had become a passageway to the upper 9 realms. Those who were not qualified to enter the Tower of the Apex were doomed to be unable to enter. Moreover, it had been half a month since the opening of the upper 9 realms. Almost all the strong who were qualified to enter the upper 9 realms had left. It was the same in the world of burning immortals. Every second mattered in the struggle for the Tao, so time was naturally extremely precious. Therefore, there were very few people like Lin Sun, who had already ranked first on the ladder of heaven, but had not yet entered the upper 9 realms. This made all the practitioners in the city feel very strange. What on earth was Demon Lin waiting for? But for those big forces in the city, they felt depressed. As long as Demon Lin didn't leave, they couldn't feel at ease. Lin Sun didn't care about these. No one knew that he was just waiting for an opportunity. Therefore, whether it was in the 3000 world or the upper 9 realms, there was not much difference for him. However, he certainly couldn't give up the opportunity to enter the upper 9 realms. In the upper 9 realms, there were heaven-defying fortunes that had been sealed for thousands of years, as well as unexpected opportunities. Even for the top kings, it was a great attraction. Moreover, there were many enemies waiting for him in the upper 9 realms. If he didn't go there, not only would he not be able to kill the enemies, but he would also be regarded as a threat. Alu hasn't returned yet. It seems that he has already gone to the upper 9 realms. What about Old Toad? When will he come out of the Fenshin Valley? In the palace, Lin Sun sat quietly and thought. In the end, he made a decision. Before the passage of the upper 9 realms closed, if Old Toad didn't appear, he would go alone. Immediately, Lin Sun sighed softly. He had been waiting for many days, but the opportunity to advance did not really come. Do I really have to go to the upper 9 realms to wait for this opportunity? Lin Sun frowned. Waiting meant being passive. He hated this kind of passive feeling the most. In particular, this kind of waiting was related to whether he could advance to the top king realm. As time went by, there were only 3 days left before the passage of the upper 9 realms closed. Lin Sun couldn't stand this kind of passive waiting. He got up, walked out of the palace, and wandered aimlessly on the street. The burning immortal city was still bustling with activity. However, all this excitement had nothing to do with Lin Sun. Walking alone on the street, he wondered whether he should go out of the city and have a look at the Fenshin Valley. Suddenly, Lin Sun stopped and turned around. Behind him, there was a large black bird that looked like a black phoenix. It was holding a large iron pot in its claw and was sneakily planning to launch a sneak attack from behind. The large black bird put away the black pot with a swoosh when it saw this, and it wasn't embarrassed in the slightest. It was calm and composed as it said, "Ha, little brother, we meet again." Lin Sun sneered. Yeah, every time we meet, it's always in such a special way. The big black bird chuckled and said, Sigh, it's just some old habits that can't be changed in a short time. It's fine as long as little brother doesn't mind. As he spoke, he soared into the sky with a whoosh. He flapped his wings, and his speed was inconceivably fast as he flashed towards the pavilion of Apex in the distance. Dahe, why did you wait until now to leave? Lin Sun asked loudly. This big blackbird was so weird. Every time they met, it was like a thief. It was very abnormal that it would run away at the slightest disagreement. You'd better care about yourself. You don't even know that a disaster is coming. There was a hint of gloating in the big black bird's voice. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. When he was about to ask further, the big black bird with a wretched aura had already rushed into the pavilion of Apex and disappeared. Obviously, it had gone to the upper 9 realms. A disaster was coming? Lin Sun frowned. Immediately, he found something wrong. Unknowingly, the nearby streets had actually become completely empty. There wasn't a single figure in sight, and it was cold, desolate, and deathly silent. He spread his spiritual awareness, but it was isolated within a range of 3,000 meters. Formation? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. His lonely figure was steaming with brilliant Taoist light, and an invisible power spread. Taoism Peer Lin, we have been waiting for you for a long time. In the void in the distance, a monk in black emerged. He was fair-skinned, holding 18 black prayer beads in his hand. His eyebrows were clear, his forehead was full, and his figure was as tall as a pine tree. But there was a kind of palpitating coldness and indifference on his face. Mu Zheng, one of the 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha. Lin Sun recognized him at a glance. In the dilapidated temple under the Boundary River, he had a conflict with Mu Zheng and heard the origin of the 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha Temple from the Heavenless sect in the sacred place. Waiting for me? Lin Sun smiled. This might be the imminent disaster that the big black bird mentioned. He said, I have heard that your Ksitigarbha Temple regards me as the #1 heretic and wants to release me from purgatory. So, you are here to do that? Mu Jing put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. Taoism Peer Lin, you have sharp eyes. Lin Sun smiled. In that case, let the others come out. A strange look flashed in Mu Zheng's eyes. He didn't expect that Lin Sun could perceive it. Then he nodded and said, Taoism Peer Lin has the power of a demon and unparalleled combat power. I am not sure that I can defeat you alone. As he said this, he said in a low voice, Brothers and sisters, please come out and meet me. As soon as he finished his words, many figures appeared silently in different directions around Lin Sun. All of them were dressed in black robes, holding prayer beads in their hands and looking solemn. Although they stood silently, they exuded a majestic aura. These 18 people were like 18 great arhats with Tao immortal standing on a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. These were the 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha Temple, divided into 3 parts: 6 senses, 6 roots, and 6 dust. They represented the 18 top figures who had forged the golden body of Arhat, and each of them had mastered a supreme inheritance. Lin Sun looked as calm as ever, but a cold light flashed in his eyes. He said, You Ksitigarbha Temple really think highly of me. Even the 18 disciples have come out together. But aren't you worried that all of you will be killed here today? Mu Jing looked cold and indifferent. He remained unmoved and said, Buddha said that if I don't go to hell, who will? Since we have shown up today, we don't need to worry about life and death. The other 17 black-robed monks also wore indifferent expressions. Obviously, they came prepared. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn. In the empty street and silent atmosphere, Lin Sun was besieged by 18 descendants of Ksitigarbha Temple, which was a depressing picture. Why do you choose to take action at this time? Lin Sun frowned and was puzzled. If we let you enter the upper 9 realms, I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to have a chance to send you to the afterlife. Mu Jing looked very magnanimous, but it was this magnanimity that chilled people's hearts. Lin Sun narrowed his black eyes and said, I don't think I have a deep hatred with Ksitigarbha Temple. Why do you still target me like this? In fact, he had already known the answer from the big black bird. Now he just wanted to confirm it again. Mu Jing said indifferently, Don't you understand? You robbed the Taoist scripture and a piece of Bodhi wood left by ancestor Du Ji of Ksitigarbha Temple. In order to protect the inheritance of Ksitigarbha Temple from being leaked, we can only do this. Lin Sun snorted with a touch of contempt on his face. He said, Mu Jing, you know best what happened at that time. I got the Taoist scripture and the Bodhi wood by chance. How can you rob them? If so, the fortunes and opportunities in the absolute domain don't belong to Ksitigarbha Temple. Why do you also come to compete for them? Speaking of this, Lin Sun smiled silently. His black eyes glanced at the 18 disciples present, and he said softly, Don't you feel ashamed? His voice was like thunder. Mu Jing's face changed slightly, but he recovered immediately. He said indifferently, What's the use of quibbling at this time? After that, he changed the topic and said, Of course, we aren't willing to make things too difficult for fellow Taoists. So long as you hand over the Tao scripture and Bodhi wood and cripple your own cultivation, then we'll be merciful and definitely leave fellow Taoist alive. Lin Sun was stunned at first, and then he laughed involuntarily. What a damn baldy! I didn't expect that you could say such shameless words. I'm serious. Fellow Taoist, please reconsider. Mu Jing spoke indifferently with a tranquil expression, and he had a bearing as if victory was within his grasp. Fellow Taoist, please reconsider. The other 17 monks in black also spoke in a loud and solemn voice. Cold killing intent surged in Lin Sun's eyes. He was completely enraged. These bald donkeys were all dignified. They talked about being merciful, but in fact, their hypocritical behavior was disgusting. They were even worse than a real villain. I'm not talented, but I've also mastered some secret methods of Buddhism. Today, I'd like to see who will ascend who. Lin Sun took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. Suddenly, a kind of solemn Zen aura emerged around him. This was the power of the Dharma scripture. Mu Jing and others narrowed their eyes slightly and finally couldn't calm down. They were keenly aware that Lin Sun's aura was similar to theirs, but with a trace of different charm. Sure enough, he's a heretic. Mu Jing and others were all like angry Buddhas. Their black frock fluttered in the wind, and a terrible murderous aura emerged. Let's do it and ascend this guy. A monk with a thick skeleton and a resolute look stepped out, with a grand and surging black Buddha light all over his body. His Buddhist name was Mu Jing. As soon as he chopped out, he put his palms together, and a skanda suddenly appeared above his head. With a fierce look, he suddenly stepped into the air and punched at Lin Sun. Ksitigarbha Temple's most precious inheritance, Wrath of Skanda. Boom! The majestic skanda bloomed with infinite Buddha light. When it pressed down, the fist force condensed into the shape of a lotus, which seemed to be able to purify and ascend all things. It was extremely powerful. Lin Sun sneered and put his palms together. Above his head, a skanda also appeared. What was different was that this Dharma idol was surrounded by black phoenix flames, and there was an overbearing aura of destruction amidst its ferocity. Moreover, when he punched out, the fist force evolved into a lotus. In the center of the lotus, there was a black phoenix dancing in the fire, as if it wanted to hit the sky. Dong! The two skanda collided with each other. It was like two gods fighting against each other. Infinite light burst out and the roar shook the sky. However, with just one blow, the skanda condensed by Mu Jing was smashed and destroyed by the endless black phoenix fire, turning into ashes. Chapter 1189. It was the same Wrath of Skanda, but Mu Jing, one of the 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha Temple who had been practicing Buddhism since childhood, was defeated by a layman in one blow. The eyes of Mu Jing and the others squinted, and they berated in unison. Heretic! Their voices were full of anger. As for Mujing, he revealed an expression of disbelief. Losing to the world-suppressing inheritance that he was most proficient in was a huge blow to him. Tut! A young monk with delicate features stepped out. His Buddhist name was Mu Hung, and he was chanting in Sanskrit. In an instant, a black Buddha light condensed and turned into a rui. The rui was 3 feet long and was imprinted with Buddhist characters. It suddenly chopped down in the void with the power to suppress the sky and the earth. Ksitigarbha Dharma. At the same time, Lin Sun also chanted in Sanskrit and displayed Ksitigarbha Dharma. However, the rui condensed was as big as a mountain and filled the world. The Buddhist characters imprinted on it were condensed by the divine flame of Black Phoenix, which was shocking. Bang! Mu Hung was defeated by the same blow. His face was pale and his chest was undulating. He was so uncomfortable that he almost coughed up blood. This made Mu Zheng and others furious and couldn't believe it. An outsider had used their Ksitigarbha temple's supreme inheritance to suppress 2 of their fellow disciples. This was simply unimaginable. You regard me as a heresy, but I was defeated by your best Taoism. Isn't it too shameful? Lin Sun looked solemn, with Buddha light flowing all over his body. He was more like a Buddhist practitioner than the Buddhist practitioners of Ksitigarbha temple. This made Mu Zheng and others a little gloomy. Brothers, this guy has obviously practiced the scripture left by Grandmaster Du Ji. If we don't eradicate him today, the Taoism of Ksitigarbha temple will be shaken. Mu Zheng shouted. Other monks said in a deep voice, I'm willing to subdue the demon with my life. Boom! The battle broke out. The 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha temple all displayed their own Taoism and suppressed Lin Sun from all directions. For a moment, the Buddha light surged and the Sanskrit sounded. There was a grand vision of Buddha chanting sutras and flowers falling from the sky. This place seemed to have turned into a battlefield of Buddhism. At the same time, Lin Sun also launched an attack. The Buddha light spread under his feet and condensed into a 9th-grade black lotus seat. Above his head, a black phoenix hovered and cried in the sky. Burn! A black-robed monk stepped on a huge dragon, looking like a dragon arhat. The prayer beads in his hand glowed and burned fiercely with Buddhist fire. Ksitigarbha temple's inheritance, purifying lotus fire. Lin Sun's black eyes were calm, and the light of wisdom flowed between his eyebrows. He waved his sleeve and responded with purifying lotus fire. In the blink of an eye, the Buddhist lights collided, and the black-robed monk's face was burnt black. If he hadn't dodged in time, he would have been drowned in the sea of fire. This caused the others to be even more shocked and furious. Moreover, as the battle continued, Mu Zheng and others were shocked to find that no matter what secret method they used, it would be broken by Lin Sun with the same secret method, and the power was even stronger. How is this possible? Their expressions were gloomy and uncertain, and their mental states were affected. Losing to the enemy was not scary. What was scary was losing to the Tao technique that one was most proficient in. This was the most ruthless blow. Puff! Not long after, someone coughed up blood and was injured by Lin Sun's Buddhist mudra. Bang! Soon, another person was shaken by Lin Sun's shout and flew out in the confrontation of Buddha's sound, and his soul almost collapsed. At a glance, the area where Lin Sun walked was surrounded by Buddha's light, lotus thrones, and black phoenix. It was like a real Buddha coming to the world, with Buddha's power as vast as the sea. This caused the eyes of Mu Zheng and the others to almost split apart from rage, and they were beyond furious in their hearts. How could this be? Before, they called Lin Sun a heretic and wanted to send him to the afterlife. Their words were full of indifference and coldness. But at this time they were like frightened birds. Their hearts were in turmoil, and they no longer had their previous demeanor. For Lin Sun, this battle made him realize that the Dharma scripture of silence written by holy monk Du Ji and Black Phoenix Holy Queen was more magical and terrifying than he had expected. This scripture was a combination of the earthly scripture and the inheritance of Black Phoenix. It was deduced by the two sages with supreme wisdom after countless years. How could it be ordinary? It could be said that the profundities of the Tao arts grasped by Mu Zheng and the others had been deduced into the Samsara scripture by Reverend Du Ji a long time ago, and he deduced and improved it once more. Now all of this was mastered by Lin Sun. When he used it to deal with Mu Zheng and others, it would naturally play an incredible role. For example, all the secrets of Mu Zheng and the others had been exposed. Naturally, they no longer had any deterrence. Rumble. The battle continued. However, the 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha Temple were defeated like a landslide. They were easily suppressed by Lin Sun. At this point, they were all injured and on the verge of collapse. Heresy! Do you really think we can't do anything to you? Mu Zheng roared. His body was dyed in blood, his injuries extremely serious. He was like an infuriated vicious beast, the space between his brows full of resentment. Formation! He shouted loudly while a wisp of resolution flashed between his brows. The other 17 disciples chanted the name of Buddha, and their expressions became solemn, cold, and resolute. An obscure aura that caused one's heart to palpitate surged out from them in unison, and it shot into the sky and caused the heavens and the earth to dim down. A chill suddenly rose in Lin's heart, and he had a premonition that something was wrong. Up! Mu Zheng shouted. Suddenly, a mysterious and complicated formation emerged in this world, like blooming Adumbra flowers in the legend. The next moment, Lin Sun only felt that his figure flashed, and suddenly he had come to the sky above the ancient city of burning immortals. Around him, Mu Zheng, Mu Heng, and other descendants of Ksitigarbha Temple stood in a square formation, as if they were stepping on a lotus throne. Small Sumeru demon sealing formation? Lin Sun was shocked at first, but he calmed down after having insight into the mystery of it. He had recognized that the formation formed by Mu Zheng and others was also recorded in Dharma scripture of solitude. The reason why he was silently besieged in the city just now should be due to the power of this formation. You can't think that you can deal with me with this formation, can you? Lin Sun was a little puzzled. In fact, he felt a little uneasy and alert, which made him fully alert and didn't act rashly. At this time, Mu Zheng's expression seemed a little strange, with determination, resentment, and a kind of indifference and calmness that faced death with equanimity. The other 17 disciples were the same. Fellow Taoist Lin, I've said it before. After we made the decision to deal with you, we no longer have to worry about our lives. Even the heavens won't spare a heretic like you. Today you're bound to suffer calamity. Mu Zheng looked indifferent. He emphasized on the word tribulation. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. With a clang, the broken sword suddenly swept out. The sense of crisis in his heart became more and more intense. He realized that he couldn't wait any longer, although he didn't know what kind of killing move Mu Zheng and others would use. But he couldn't wait any longer. However, right at the same time that the broken blade flashed out, a strand of obscure aura suddenly surged out from Mu Zheng's body and shot into the sky. Boom! For no reason, there was a muffled thunder in the clear sky. The sound was like a divine drum, resounding in Lin Sun's heart, which made his face change suddenly. He took back the broken sword without hesitation. At the same time, countless practitioners in the whole ancient city of burning immortals felt their hearts tremble and their hair stood on end, as if they were stared at by the eyes of God. Countless pairs of eyes turned to look at the sky. When they saw Lin Sun alone and besieged by 18 monks, many practitioners were shocked and almost couldn't believe it. It's the successor of Ksitigarbha Temple. Someone cried out, causing a great commotion. Long ago, there was a rumor that the successor of Ksitigarbha Temple regarded Lin Sun as the #1 heretic and wanted to send him to the afterlife. But no one had expected that this scene would actually happen. The whole city was shocked. No one knew how many people were shocked and in an uproar. There were only 3 days left before the passage to the upper 9 regions closed. When everyone was wondering why Lin Sun didn't take any action, they saw such a scene. Who wouldn't be surprised? The city was shocked, but the sky was depressed and chilling. Lin Sun's black eyes surged with cold light. He looked at Mu Jing and others one by one, and finally looked up to the sky above his head. There, the blue void had been covered by a layer of ink-black, thick and boundless tribulation cloud, emitting an oppressive and frightening atmosphere. It was so oppressive that it made people unable to breathe. The restless and uproarious practitioners in the city shuddered and felt weak all over. This was a sign that heaven's retribution was coming. More and more tribulation clouds gathered in the sky. It was originally daytime, but at this moment, it seemed to have fallen into an eternal night. You didn't hesitate to attract your king's way heaven's retribution. Don't tell me you want to kill me with the power of tribulation thunder? Lin Sun's black hair flew in the wind, his eyes full of cold light, and his clothes fluttered. Mu Jing looked indifferent. He nodded and said, "That's right. We have long known that Taoist Lin's combat power is superb and not something we can match. Only with the help of the tribulation power of heaven can we send you to the afterlife." As he spoke, he pointed to the tribulation cloud in the sky and said, "Look, when the tribulation thunder descends, it is destined to cover this place. Although it is my tribulation, you are destined to be unable to escape." Using the power of heaven's retribution to kill Lin Sun, the practitioners in the city gasped and shivered. This successor of Kitagarbha Temple was simply too ruthless. He was completely going to destroy Lin Sun. "Aren't you afraid of death?" Lin Sun's expression was cold. At this moment, he completely understood what Mu Jing and the others were thinking, and he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. No wonder these bald donkeys of Kitagarbha Temple were feared by the world. In order to achieve their goals, they could even sacrifice their lives. They were simply too ruthless and crazy. If we can use our lives to help fellow Taoists ascend, even if we die, it will be no different from going to the Western Paradise. Mu Jing's expression became more and more firm and decisive. Lin Sun took a deep breath and glanced around. He found that the other 17 disciples were all surging with obscure auras, communicating with the sky. Obviously, they were also going to trigger their own King's Way heaven's retribution at this moment. 18 people, 18 King's Way tribulations, were about to descend in this area. Lin Sun's heart sank. There was no chance to escape. There were people going through the tribulation in all directions, and this area was sealed by the small Sumeru demon sealing formation. Not to mention breaking the formation, just getting close to it would be tainted by the tribulation. How could he escape? This was a fatal situation. P.S. Have you ever seen the protagonist kill the enemy with the tribulation? Have you ever seen the enemy kill the enemy with the tribulation? Children, please spend your monthly vote. The more monthly votes you have, the more powerful Devil Lin's tribulation will be. Chapter 1190. If one wanted to step into the King realm, he must go through heaven's retribution. This was the consensus of cultivators. Once this retribution was passed, one could transcend the 5 realms of cultivation and stand on the higher King realm. If not, one would either die or be reduced to a half-step King realm. Mu Jing and the other Ksitagarbha 18 sons were obviously not acting on a whim to trigger the retribution of King Path at this moment. They had planned it for a long time. In the sky, the clouds were thick and heavy, far beyond the ordinary. It was shocking and extremely rare. Such a retribution was rare in the past. Who could imagine that there would be 18 strong cultivators going through the retribution together? Whoosh, in the oppressive dark world, a sudden gust of wind blew between heaven and earth. It was like a demonic sound in chaos, shocking the world. Mu Jing and the others were silent, looking solemn and determined. They were waiting for their retribution to come so that they could wipe out the heretic Lin Sun. "Crazy," Lin Sun murmured. These bald donkeys were indeed too crazy and too ruthless. In order to deal with him, they even risked their lives. He looked up at the sky. The clouds were thick. Although the thunder retribution hadn't come, Lin soon knew that once it came, the 18 retributions would burst out together, enough to cover this area. He had no way to escape. But how could Lin soon sit still and wait for death? At this moment, he looked up at the clouds in the sky and suddenly thought that he had been waiting for an opportunity to become a king. He had been passive and helpless these days. On the contrary, the 18 sons of Xidagarba had fearlessly triggered the thunder retribution of King Path in order to fight him to the death. This was undoubtedly crazy, but it greatly inspired Lin Sun. His state of mind was touched, and an uncontrollable thought emerged in his mind. In the city of immortal burning, countless cultivators were depressed. They stared at the sky with horror. They also had a premonition that Lin Sun, who was trapped in the center of the 18 suns, was destined to have no way to escape. Before, they all thought that even if Lin Sun suffered a retribution, it would happen in the upper 9 realms. They didn't expect that everything would happen in advance. This caught them off guard. These monks of the Xidagarba temple are really abnormal. Is Lin Sun finished? How can he defeat heaven in this situation? Many cultivators sighed with sorrow in their hearts. Fiend god Lin was so peerless and heaven-defying, yet he still couldn't avoid being schemed against. As for the heirs of the large factions, they were all excited and gloating. In their hearts they thought to themselves, Demon God Lin, to think that such a day would come for you. Boom! The sound of thunder resounded within the tribulation clouds at this moment, and it shook the heavens and the earth, causing the surroundings to tremble. Numerous peerlessly thick bolts of silver tribulation lightning that were visible to the eye surged like numerous lightning dragons that were roiling about, and they were dazzling and resplendent while emitting an aura of obliteration. Many cultivators shivered, and they felt extremely oppressed and horrified. This was a heavenly tribulation, a tribulation from the heavens. Under the tribulation, all living beings were like ants. He's here. Mu Jing suddenly raised his head, his expression determined. At the same time, the other 17 students raised their heads to look at the sky with solemn expressions, as if they were facing death with equanimity. Lin Sun's long hair fluttered in the wind. His dark eyes were deep and cold, flashing with a frightening luster. His figure was solitary, his clothes fluttered, and his expression was extremely calm. Suddenly, he asked, Mu Jing, as long as I'm alive, will your Xidagarba temple fight to the death? His voice was indifferent. Alive? A trace of pity appeared in Mu Jing's eyes. Did this guy really think he could live? That's right. Mu Jing answered firmly, you can give up now. A cold smile appeared on Lin Sun's lips. Give up now? You're wrong. I just want to tell you one thing before you die. Mu Jing's expression became more and more pitiful, as if he was listening to Lin Sun's last words. As long as I'm alive, there will be no Xidagarba temple in the world one day. Lin Sun said word by word, and his words went straight to the heart. Mu Jing and the others narrowed their eyes slightly, and then they recovered their composure immediately. Obviously, they took Lin Sun's words as his venting before death, and they didn't care about it at all. In the ancient city of immortal burning, all the cultivators were shocked. Obviously, Lin Sun hated the Xidagarba temple to the core for saying such ruthless words. However, could he survive? The hope was too slim. In the sky, the tribulation clouds were rolling, and the silver tribulation lightning was flickering and rumbling. It was about to descend. Mu Jing and the others didn't speak a word, and none of them were careless. Of course, they didn't want to die just like that. It would undoubtedly be better if they could successfully overcome the tribulation and kill Lin Sun at the same time. Boom! A rumble resounded, and it shocked all living beings. They thought the tribulation had begun. The hearts of Mu Jing and the others skipped a beat, and they were about to attack and face the tribulation. But what caught the cultivators and Mu Zheng off guard was that the rumble didn't come from the sky, but from Lin Sun. At this moment, he looked up at the sky with his black hair fluttering in the wind, and his tall and straight figure had been suffused with dazzling Taoist light. His whole body was like a great abyss that lay across the world, and it seemed to intend to devour the world. The rumble was the sound of the void shattering and collapsing when the abyss rotated. All the cultivators in the city were dumbfounded. He's also going to overcome the tribulation. Mu Zheng and the others were shocked. Does this mean that he's on the verge of death, so he's given up on advancing into the peak of the king realm and intends to overcome the tribulation now? However, in this way, he's bound to be an ordinary king realm existence even if he survives, and he'll have no fate with the path to become a king. This is equivalent to abandoning the path he seeks, and it's a huge sacrifice. Bang! The tribulation lightning that was surging and surging in the sky had actually stopped at this moment and returned to silence. It seemed as if it had been suppressed. At the same time, a strand of an aura that was even more terrifying and oppressive than before effused out from the depths of the sky. After that, the entire immortal incineration city was shaken. Countless cultivators were terrified to the point their scalps were on the verge of exploding, and their entire bodies felt weak. Some cultivators with slightly weaker strengths directly lay prostrate on the ground and shivered. An even more unbelievable scene occurred. The energy of the 5 elements that enveloped the entire immortal incineration city actually started to circulate soundlessly at this moment. They seemed to have noticed danger and started to defend themselves. On the other hand, violent winds blew while space fell into disorder outside the city, and it revealed signs of extreme chaos. Amidst the boundless mountains and rivers, groups of mountains were shaking, rocks were collapsing, trees were swaying violently, and countless ferocious beasts that resided in the forests were wailing and fleeing in panic. The rivers, waterfalls, and lakes seemed as if they were seething and rumbling. At this moment, the expressions of all the cultivators that were searching for fortune in different areas of the immortal incineration city had changed, and they felt great terror coiling around their hearts. When they looked up into the sky, they noticed that dazzling and resplendent gorgeous tribulation clouds had suddenly surged into appearance from the depths of space. It was like a ray of flowing light in the universe, and it carried a form of breathtaking beauty. It was a tribulation cloud. However, it revealed an extremely gorgeous and dazzling color, and it was surging into appearance in the sky at this moment. My God! What sort of tribulation is this? At this moment, countless voices of astonishment resounded from different areas of the immortal incineration city. In other words, the entire immortal incineration city had been alarmed at this moment. To the cultivators in the city, it was like they were witnessing an upheaval of the heavens at this moment. Firstly, the heavenly tribulations caused by the 18 disciples of the Kitagarbha temple could be said to be unparalleled, unprecedented, and terrifying. At this moment, the 18 waves of tribulation lightning hadn't descended yet it had fallen into deathly silence as if it had submitted. Because an even more terrifying, blazing, and world-shocking tribulation cloud had surged into appearance from the depths of space. How should it be described? It was gorgeous and resplendent to the extreme. It illuminated the originally dim heavens and the earth to the point it was bright and resplendent, and it caused space to be dyed in brilliant and blazing light. Numerous crystalline tribulation lightning that seemed like divine chains of order could be faintly seen flickering within the strange and gorgeous tribulation cloud, and it was dreamlike, pure, and supreme. However, boundless terror surged into the hearts of every single cultivator that witnessed this scene. Their bodies stiffened as if they'd fallen into an icy pit, and even breathing was difficult. Mu Zheng and the others were stunned as well. Their hearts shook while their expressions changed with astonishment, and they'd lost their solemn and calm expressions from before. Originally, they intended to overcome the tribulation, Yet never had they imagined that the tribulation that belonged to them would actually be completely suppressed. Even more horrifying to them was that as soon as the gorgeous and dazzling tribulation cloud appeared, it caused them to be unable to help but feel terrified and helpless. It was too terrifying. It was utterly indescribable with words. Could it be the ultimate king tribulation that belongs to demonic god Lin? Impossible. Mu Zheng and the others didn't believe it at all. Without the assistance of heaven-defying fortune or an unparalleled fortuitous encounter seized by demonic god Lin, how could he possibly have the opportunity to attain the peak of the Tao? If the ultimate king tribulation was so easy to cause, then countless cultivators in the world would have charged into the king realm a long time ago. This was absolutely impossible for it to be the ultimate king tribulation. But why was it so terrifying? Mu Zheng and the others were horrified in their hearts. All of this overturned their understanding, causing them to be unable to make any judgment, and they could only look at Lin Sun in unison. At this moment, Lin Sun's entire body seemed illusory while the glow of the Tao flowed within him. He was shaped like an abyss, and the aura he emanated could be described as vast and boundless like an abyss. Merely a single glance caused Mu Zheng and the others to feel tiny and powerless to be shaken. He's too formidable. Is this demonic god Lin's entire reserve? Mu Zheng and the others were furious. Previously, they had nothing to fear and wanted to use the heavenly tribulation to kill Lin Sun. Even if they had to perish together, they would not hesitate. The effects were very obvious. Lin Sun was trapped and did not dare to break out of the encirclement or approach. He was like a prisoner awaiting death with nowhere to run. However, in the blink of an eye, everything had been reversed. Lin Sun had disregarded everything and triggered the descent of the peerless heavenly tribulation to suppress the power of the heavenly tribulation that belonged to the 18 of them, causing them to fall into a passive position. At this moment they did not dare to retreat, approach, or attack Lin Sun for fear of being tainted by the terrifying heavenly tribulation. Was this karma? What made them most uneasy was that, if they were to transcend the heavenly tribulation at the same time as Lin Sun, it was extremely likely that they would not only have to endure their own heavenly tribulation, but they would also be affected by Lin Sun's heavenly tribulation. That was the most terrifying thing. At the thought of this, Mu Zheng and the others were depressed to the point they wanted to vomit blood, and their faces turned extremely livid. How could they have imagined that a certain death situation would be reversed in such a manner? Chapter 1191. Don't seek external help. Looking at the dazzling tribulation clouds that emerged in the sky, these words resounded ceaselessly in the depths of Lin Sun's heart. At this moment, he completely realized that he'd made a mistake before. He'd always pinned his hopes of attaining the peak of the king realm on that illusory opportunity, so that he fell into a passive state of waiting and couldn't get what he wanted. This had always been in conflict with the path he sought. His Tao did not rely on external objects, nor did he rely on opportunities and fortune. He sought his own Tao. Since that was the case, why should he wait for that opportunity? Don't seek external help. It was also when he fell into a predicament and witnessed Mu Zheng and the others provoking the tribulation that Lin Sun suddenly came back to his senses and awakened from his thoughts. If the opportunity didn't come, why not take the initiative to fight for it? It was precisely when he understood this that Lin Sun completely swept away the haze in his heart, turned passivity into initiative, and resolutely chose to completely release it at this moment. He released his cultivation, path, essence, chi, and spirit to the extreme to seek and seize that opportunity to advance. He didn't disappoint, he succeeded. In the depths of the sky, vast tribulation clouds emerged. They were extremely gorgeous, and unlike the world, they were extremely magnificent. Lin Sun knew that this was his tribulation. As long as he got through it, the king realm would be within reach. The tribulation clouds were dazzling and boundless, and they shook the surroundings, causing the entire immortal burning world to fall into a trembling and oppressive atmosphere. This was a great terror that could destroy the world. All the cultivators inside and outside the city shuddered with fear. They felt extremely tiny and helpless, and they shivered all over. Mu Zheng and the other 18 Xidigarba sons were shocked and furious, and their minds were in turmoil. They similarly felt a fatal threat. Only Lin Sun laughed loudly at this moment, and his voice was like a dragon's roar that shook the 9 heavens. He'd been trapped in the reincarnation developing realm for too long, and he'd waited for too long. Hadn't all these years of hard work and cultivation been for this moment? Life should be enjoyed to the fullest. Although an unprecedented tribulation was approaching, it was the most complacent moment for Lin Sun in his pursuit of the Tao. To obtain the meaning of the Great Way and forget one's own form. This was called being complacent. Looking at the young man in the sky who was laughing with his head thrown back and looking down on the Great Tribulation, everyone's hearts were filled with shock and complicated emotions. A fatal situation had been reversed in the blink of an eye. Such methods could be said to be able to summon clouds and rain with a flip of the hand. Demon God Lin is destined not to be defeated, someone murmured. As for Mu Zheng and the others, their expressions were extremely ugly at this moment. Lin Sun was regarded as a heretic, and they wanted to eradicate him. They even wanted to die together with him. But now everything was uncertain, which made their mood extremely bad. Everyone, why don't you come with me? Lin Sun's black eyes were like lightning. With a smile on his lips, he glanced at Mu Zheng and others, exuding an unparalleled and peerless style. Mu Zheng and the others felt their hearts skip a beat as they secretly cried out in alarm. But the situation was already out of their control. As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Sun had already soared into the sky, and his figure was like a great abyss as he met the tribulation cloud in the sky. Rumble! In the depths of the gorgeous and blazing tribulation cloud, numerous tribulation lightning that were like divine chains of order surged out, and every single one of them was crystalline, translucent, divine, and resplendent. It seemed to have been infuriated by Lin Sun's provocation. Along with rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth, a dazzling and crystalline bolt of tribulation lightning struck down first. It was like a chain of heavenly punishment had descended, and it intended to lash the world. Bring it on! Lin Sun didn't dodge, and he leaped up to meet it head-on. The grand Tao around him rumbled as it erupted, and it transformed into a great abyss that collided head-on with the bolt of tribulation lightning. Bang! Lightning shot out as Lin Sun's figure staggered. A bloody hole had been pierced through his shoulder, and his skin was charred black. But along with the circulation of the energy of the undying Grand Tao, this little bit of injury was instantly healed. His entire body was bathed in the collapsing tribulation lightning while a rain of light fluttered about, and he was simply like a demon god that defied the heavens. His mighty and arrogant posture caused the mouths of all the cultivators that noticed this scene to open wide. How peerless and supreme was that tribulation lightning! Yet it was actually blocked just like that? Rumble! At the same time, the 18 waves of tribulation lightning that had been suppressed in the sky and had fallen into silence poured down at this moment. For a time, the sky was completely filled with a torrent of lightning, and it was like a river of tribulation lightning was surging down. It was too terrifying. Merely looking at it from afar caused the cultivators in the city to be terrified to the point their souls almost flew out of their bodies. Many people's souls were terrified, and they fell weakly to the ground. Damn it! This damnable heretic! Mu Zheng and the others were like frightened rabbits, and they cursed as they resisted the tribulation lightning. How could they possibly stay out of it when such a tribulation lightning descended? This was originally a tribulation that belonged to them, but at this moment it was detonated by Lin Sun. The 18 waves of tribulation lightning converged densely in the same area, and it was equivalent to causing all 18 of them to suffer such a blow at the same time. So, how could it possibly be so easy to resist? In a hurry, Mu Zheng and the others let out shrill cries. They were struck by the tribulation lightning to the point of covering their heads and fleeing like rats, and they wailed endlessly. They had no choice but to resist it desperately. On the other hand, their expressions were extremely unsightly, and they felt like crying yet had no tears. This might be called harming oneself instead of harming others. No, for them Buddhist cultivators, this could only be called the cycle of karma and retribution. High in the sky, Lin Sun laughed with extreme pleasure. These seemingly sanctimonious but actually hypocritical and shameless baldies had probably never thought that they would encounter such a blow, right? It was so satisfying. It was so satisfying. With a click, a dazzling and translucent chain of tribulation lightning descended and directly struck Lin Sun, who was laughing without any warning, causing his skin and flesh to split open and his bones to almost break. Extreme joy begets sorrow? The corners of Lin Sun's mouth twitched, and he suddenly let out a cold snort. He ignored Mu Zheng and the others, and rushed up violently to resist the tribulation lightning with all his strength. Soon, his body was drowned by the waterfall of tribulation lightning. How could the tribulation be ordinary? What was more, in addition to the extreme king tribulation triggered by Lin Sun himself, there were also 18 waves of King's Way thunder tribulation. Its power could be described as abnormal. Even though Lin Sun's foundation was extremely strong, his body was still convulsed by the lightning. His skin was cracked and charred, and his limbs and bones were broken inch by inch. From a distance, his whole body looked like a piece of charcoal. Mu Zheng and the others who were fighting the tribulation angrily were overjoyed when they saw this. They couldn't wait for Lin Sun to be struck to death and erased. The cultivators in the city were extremely nervous and gasped. Such an unprecedented tribulation lightning was really not so easy to resist. Even a heaven-defying figure like demon god Lin was in danger. But soon, the thunderstorm that covered the sky collapsed with a bang, and Lin Sun's tall and slender figure appeared. He bit a piece of thunder bamboo, and the thunder's spiritual liquid within it gurgled into his mouth. In an instant, Lin Sun, who was charred all over and severely injured, recovered as if he had undergone nirvana. Again, Lin Sun didn't hesitate, and his momentum became even more disdainful as he soared into the sky. In his hands, besides thunder bamboo, there were also golden wind dew, tranquilizing powder, stellar aperture recovery pill, fountain of youth, multicolored chalcedony, and other rare treasures. These were originally the precious medicines that the mysterious woman in the gate to heaven had prepared for Lin Sun when she visited the 6 ancient orthodoxies. Now they were finally put to use, and the effect was remarkable. Rumble! The extremely dazzling and resplendent tribulation lightning grew more and more terrifying. Every time it descended, it seemed as if it intended to destroy the world. A myriad of tribulation lightning poured down and covered the space there. Moreover, the tribulation lightning transformed ceaselessly. Sometimes it transformed into sabers, spears, swords, halberds, ancient cauldrons, seals, vases, and so on and so forth. In the end, it even developed into lightning palaces, mountains, rivers, and cities. This caused all the cultivators in the city to be stunned on the spot with dazed expressions. Such an unprecedented tribulation lightning had completely exceeded their understanding. It was too unbelievable and boundlessly terrifying. They didn't dare believe that such a tribulation could exist in the world. During this process, Lin Sun suffered heavy injuries over and over again. His body cracked like a piece of cloth, and blood flowed like a waterfall. In severe cases, he was almost killed on the spot. It caused everyone's hearts to rise to their throats, and they were extremely nervous to the point they almost forgot to breathe. For the sake of healing his injuries, the precious medicines in Lin Sun's possession were consumed at an astonishing speed. It wasn't that he wasn't strong enough, But the tribulation this time was formed from the combination of the 18 king tribulations and the ultimate king tribulations, and it was too abnormal. It caused everyone to be unable to help but suspect that if it was any other peerless figure, that person would have probably been eliminated a long time ago. Damn it! Mu Zheng and the others were originally excited, and they wished for nothing more than for Lin Sun to be struck to death. However, Lin Sun always turned danger into safety every single time and recovered as if he couldn't be killed. It caused them to be depressed to the point of almost going mad. But in next to no time, they couldn't be bothered about all of this, because Lin Sun's tribulation had started to spread towards them. Bang! A crystalline bolt of tribulation lightning that was shaped like a halberd charged over. Mu Jing's expression changed abruptly. He was fighting against his own tribulation, so he was utterly unable to dodge and could only go head-on against it. Then, a scene that sent chills down everyone's spines occurred. Even though Mu Jing resisted desperately, he was still like a piece of paper, and he was struck to death by the halberd. His body exploded into pieces and transformed into ash. No! Mu Zheng and the others' eyes almost split apart with rage, and blood flowed from the corners of their eyes. Even though they'd held the intention to take him down with them, it was still difficult for them to accept when death truly arrived. On the other hand, the cultivators in the city finally realized how freakish Lin Sun was. Mu Jing had been blasted to death like a piece of paper, yet Lin Sun had been constantly fighting against this level of tribulation lightning. Wasn't that freakish? Bang! Along with a shrill cry, another black-clothed monk was blasted to death, and he was instantly obliterated in both body and soul. It wasn't that they weren't strong enough, but the tribulation lightning this time was the same to them, just like Lin Sun. It was a combination of 18 waves of tribulation lightning and the ultimate king tribulation. How could they resist this? This was a hopeless situation, and they couldn't even escape it. They could only fight with their lives on the line. Even though Mu Zheng and the others were unafraid of death, they couldn't help but feel a wave of sorrow in their hearts at this moment, and they felt despair and boundless regret. If they knew this would happen, they would absolutely not have chosen to act in this way. Unfortunately, regret was useless in the end. Perhaps reaping what they sowed was the best way to describe them at this moment. Bang! 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 In the following period of time, numerous disciples of the Kitagarbha temple were blasted to death, and they didn't even have the chance to be reduced to the half-step king realm. Everyone in the city couldn't help but sigh with emotion. They brought this upon themselves. P.S. The 3rd chapter is up. Goldfish planned to post one more chapter and fight it out to finish this plot. However, it would probably be around midnight by now. Those who couldn't wait would read it tomorrow after waking up. Chapter 1192. Crack. A cauldron formed by tribulation thunder descended, crystal clear and exuding a destructive aura. No! Mu Hing roared and turned to flee. However, only by facing the tribulation could one have a chance to survive it. Fleeing would only lead to a more miserable death. Bang! Mu Heng's body exploded and turned into ashes. Normally, the great trial of King Path could not stop them at all with the foundation and talent of the 18 Ksitagarbha sons. Unfortunately, today's situation was too special. The 18 great trial of King Path and the Extinction King's tribulation all covered a part of the world. Not to mention them, even other top talents would find it hard to resist. Mu Zheng was already extremely sad and angry. He roared to the sky, regret, annoyance, unwillingness, hatred, all kinds of emotions surged in his heart. Is it really retribution? Mu Zheng's voice was like the roar of a beast on the verge of death. All the cultivators in the city felt sad. In the past, almost no one who went against Demon God Lin had a good ending. Like Golden Crow, Xuandu Taoism sect, Sea Spirit Clan, Beast Spirit Mountain, and so on. Now, the 18 Ksitagarbha sons were obviously finished. On the other hand, Lin Sun was still fighting fiercely like a demon god. He was so powerful that it made people's hearts tremble. Comparing the two, how could people not sigh? Soon, 17 of the 18 Xitigarbha sons had been killed, leaving only Mu Jing. At this moment, he was on the verge of death. He had given up resisting like a numb walking corpse. He looked up at Lin Sun, and a sentence appeared in his mind. As long as I'm alive, there will be no more Xitigarbha temple in the world. Boom! At the same time, a thunder exploded in his heart. Mu Zheng's vision went black and he lost consciousness. Before he died, there was only one thought in his heart. If Lin Sun survived, there would be no more peace in the Xitigarbha temple. At this point, the 18 Xitigarbha temple were all killed by the tribulation. This made people's hearts tremble, especially the descendants of the great forces. They were all shocked and terrified. In such a fatal situation, Lin Sun was safe and sound, but in the end, the 18 Xitigarbha temple died. How could this not be shocking? If Xitigarbha temple knew that the 18 disciples of this generation had all died like this, how would they feel? Boom! In the sky, the lightning tribulation continued to erupt. It was resplendent and dazzling. Vaguely, Lin Sun's figure was like an invincible god of war who had never been defeated so far. With the death of Xitigarbha's 18 sons, the 18 thunder tribulations strangely did not disappear, but all aimed at Lin Sun. This was the consequence of being tainted by tribulations. The reason why Lin Sun didn't choose to break out of the encirclement and even didn't approach the 18 Xitigarbha sons when he was trapped before was that he was afraid of being involved in the tribulation caused by them. But now, he had no way out. Victory was king. Defeat, death. There was no other choice. Boom! Lin Sun was hit into the air again. His whole body was covered in smoke, and his skin was burnt black. It was a horrible sight to see. But Lin Sun's eyes became bright. He could feel that his Taoist root, essence, and spirit were undergoing amazing changes in such a confrontation. As Shao Chun swallowed the celestial tribulation pill, he raised his head. The tribulation clouds in the sky churned, and it was incredibly stifling. The real danger had arrived. Lin Sun took a deep breath. He was keenly aware that the breath in the tribulation cloud was changing. Boom! Suddenly, thousands of brilliant thunder tribulations burst out. When they fell from the sky, they evolved into thousands of creatures. There were immortal birds bathed in thunder and dancing their wings. There were fierce beasts with bodies as big as mountains. They roared down like an army and filled the sky. God! Inside and outside the city, everyone's eyeballs almost fell out. Was there still a way out? Kill! Without thinking too much, Lin Sun let out a long roar and fought with all his strength. He released his strength unprecedentedly without any reservation. This was his path of cultivation, different from the world and the ages. Everything was destined, and the tribulation he faced was completely different. Even though he tried his best, it didn't take long for Lin Sun's hair to fall off. His body was cracked, and his hair was burnt and peeled off. In the end, even his tendons and bones were broken, and his internal organs were seriously injured. He encountered a great crisis. This kind of peerless king tribulation was absolutely unprecedented. It was too horrible. But at the same time, Lin Sun also felt that the tribulation thunder contained the surging essence of the Great Way. As long as it was defeated, it would be absorbed by him. Kill! Lin Sun had no choice but to fight desperately. Since he started his cultivation, he had experienced countless life and death tribulations and rose up in the tempering of blood and fire. All his achievements were earned by himself. Today's heaven's retribution might be unprecedented, but Lin Sun was not afraid of it. His injuries were getting more and more serious, but his spirit, chi and spirit were highly condensed. The cultivation in his body gave birth to a stream of Great Way essence, emitting surging vitality. It was like forging iron in a furnace. The impurities were quenched, and the unique essence was enough to forge the sharpest and most powerful sword in the world. This was a test of life and death. Fighting in the great horror between life and death, only transcendence could break the barrier of life and death and set foot on the king realm. The sea of consciousness between his eyebrows was shining. His soul was like a lamp, which seemed to illuminate the fog ahead. Boom! In the end, Lin Sun survived this tribulation. His flesh and blood were dry, and his skin was scorched and peeled off. He was seriously injured and dying. But as he absorbed the scattered tribulation thunder and light, amazing changes happened to his whole body. His flesh and blood were healed, and his tendons and bones were rebuilt. A surging essence of the Great Way surged in his body, washing his limbs and bones, making his whole body like a nirvana in fire, glowing with strong and blazing vitality. In the end, his whole body was shining with magnificent Taoist light, like an exiled immortal, unspeakably holy. This was an amazing transformation, a sign that he was entering the king realm. The world was silent and more oppressive. The tribulation clouds were thick and extremely gorgeous, and did not dissipate. This almost made everyone in the city dumbfounded. Was it not over yet? What level of peerless king tribulation was this? Whoosh! Suddenly, there was a gust of wind. When it got close to Lin Sun, it burst out with dazzling lightning and invincible killing intent. This wind-thunder tribulation was extremely strange. In an instant, Lin Sun coughed up blood and was sent flying. It seemed to sweep him up and then tear him apart. Lin Sun had just resolved this tribulation thunder with great difficulty. Flames poured down like a sea, which was also formed by thunder tribulation and had the power to incinerate everything. In a flash, Lin Sun was submerged in the sea of fire. Strangely, his body was not injured, but his soul was suffering unprecedented burning and the severe pain was unbearable. Lin Sun ran meditating magic and urged his spirit, which had already reached the level of divine flower gathering in acupoint, to fight against it. Every time an attack was defeated, the small spirit's body was a little brighter. Until all the attacks were defeated, the small spirit was bathed in divine fire, like a scorching sun, shining brightly in the sea of consciousness and illuminating itself. The fire-thunder tribulation was broken. But then there were endless ice and snow and cold currents. It was incredible. This time, the peerless king tribulation first deduced weapons and ancient treasures, and then condensed the images of mountains and rivers, palaces and cities. After that, they transformed into lifelike birds and beasts. Until now, they had turned into scenes of natural disasters such as wind, snow and fire. Not to mention Lin Sun, even the practitioners inside and outside the city had never seen such a spectacle, which was extremely incredible. Gradually, Lin Sun was about to be unable to hold on and became dizzy. He had suffered an unimaginably serious blow. It was too miserable. Many practitioners couldn't bear to see it. This was the great horror between life and death. One careless move would destroy his soul. Kill! Lin Sun let out a roar, trying to keep his mind clear. He tried his best and used up all his cultivation. That kind of resolute and disdainful attitude moved and shocked countless people. What was a real talent? This was it. Unyielding, against heaven and earth, never giving up. In this battle, Lin Sun was on the verge of despair, struggling between life and death, experiencing unprecedented hardships and dangers. Every time he defeated the tribulation thunder, he would gain vitality, improve his strength, and transform his body inside and outside. There was vitality in danger, and a new life emerged in destruction. Kill! But no matter what happened, Lin Sun's eyes were always blazing, and his fighting spirit didn't diminish. No matter what kind of damage he suffered, he was never discouraged. Both inside and outside the city were silent. Invisible shock pervaded everyone's heart. All eyes were fixed on the lonely fighting figure in the sky, and they were in a trance. Boom! After countless struggles, the tribulation thunder in the sky collapsed into a rain of light. At this time, Lin Sun's vitality was almost exhausted. This battle was so difficult that he fought to the extreme and forgot everything. His body was broken, scorched, and haggard, without an inch of intact body. But his figure was still tall and straight, like a mountain that had never been bent. Did I succeed? When he looked up with difficulty, he saw that the tribulation clouds in the sky had disappeared. Lin Sun was stunned at first, and then gradually woke up from his dazed and numb consciousness. All was quiet and the world was silent. Only he stood proudly under the sky alone. He succeeded. An indescribable emotion emerged in Lin Sun's heart. Then, he suddenly looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. That howl was like a new king that was announcing its arrival, and it caused the surroundings to tremble while the heavens, earth, mountains, and rivers resonated with it. Countless cultivators inside and outside the city were stunned, and their hearts were filled with indescribable awe and shock. Boom! Around Lin Sun, a big abyss emerged and engulfed the universe. From all directions, countless tribulation thunder and light rain surged and poured into Lin Sun's broken, scorched, and scarred body. Then, his aura underwent an earth-shattering change. Inside and outside his body, his injuries were healed invisibly. His blood and chi were surging like lava, his muscles and bones were as white as jade, and the bright light of Tao flowed in his internal organs, emitting surging vitality like the sea. His divine soul was like a lamp, illuminating his body alone, as if immortal and eternal. And in his body, the place where the wheel of development was originally condensed was replaced by a Tao seed with bright luster. P.S. The fourth update is here. Demon God Lin finally set foot in the King Realm. Next, it was the competition for the upper 9 realms, which would be more exciting. Chapter 1193. At the instant that the Tao seed was condensed, Lin Sun felt unprecedentedly strong. It seemed as if even the corrosion of time couldn't destroy him. It wasn't that his lifespan wouldn't increase, but it was a form of longevity. Bang! The heavens and the earth were trembling while the void rumbled. Boundless light flowed, and it illuminated Lin Sun to the point he was dazzling, pure, and otherworldly. Unlike the miserable and sorry state he was in earlier, he stood towering in the sky. Even though he didn't move, he emanated the might of looking down upon the world. The hearts of countless cultivators inside and outside the city trembled, and they felt boundless pressure and reverence. The King Realm stood proudly above the 5 realms. Its soul was like a lamp, and it was eternal. If a saint didn't appear, then the King Realm reigned supreme. In the entire ancient desolation region, only 1 in 10,000 could step foot into the King Realm, and it was extremely rare. Such strength was sufficient to be called an overlord of the world, and it was capable of deterring a region and being respected by all. There were differences in the King Realm as well. A king that hadn't condensed a Tao seed was a false king. On the other hand, Lin Sun was bound to be different from a king in the secular world. He'd overcome the peerless king tribulation, forged the peerless Tao seed, and stepped foot into the peerless King Realm. Such a realm had never been born throughout the ages. It was only after the descent of the peerless domain this time that some ancient freaks and top figures had stepped foot into this realm. But they were extremely few. Even amongst the top figures, it was 1 in 1,000. Yet Lin Sun had stepped foot into this realm today. This was unbelievable, because everyone clearly saw that from the beginning until the end, Lin Sun hadn't obtained any heaven-defying fortune, nor had he obtained the assistance of heaven-defying fortune. He'd forcefully triggered an unprecedented and rare peerless tribulation by himself, and then he'd broken through the lightning tribulation to become a king. This was something that no one could believe or predict. All of this meant that the path Lin Sun took was destined to be different from other peerless kings. It was like a miracle. Rumble. In the sky, Lin Sun's body rumbled, and he was undergoing the final transformation and sublimation. He closed his eyes and sensed the changes in his body in meditation. Within his body, the wheel development no longer existed. It was replaced by a strange and resplendent Tao seed. It gathered all of his cultivation and contained an unimaginably terrifying vitality. It was smooth, translucent, ethereal, and resplendent. As the qi and blood in his body circulated, it resonated with him from afar, producing a strange rhythm that was like breathing. The Tao seed was the foundation of the king realm, the foundation of one's Tao. It was like a seed. Along with the advancement of one's cultivation, the seed would take root, sprout, and grow vigorously to become a towering tree. This tree could be called eternal life. The Tao seed was the core of the reason king realm experts in the world were able to seek the path to immortality. Obviously, Lin Sun's Tao seed was different from that of other kings. It was shaped like an abyss, with water and fire swirling around it. There was undying energy within it, and there was a true dragon within it. It was incomparably mystical, and the backing it contained was also incomparably terrifying. Meanwhile, in his sea of consciousness, his soul similarly underwent a transformation. Like a divine lamp, his primordial spirit condensed into a second jade-like translucent divine flower. This flower's name was Present World Insight. This realm was the second of the three realms of divine flower gathering in one's head. Generally speaking, only those who set foot in the king realm for the first time had the power to seek and comprehend the power of divine flower gathering in one's head. It could be seen from this that Lin Sun had long surpassed his peers in the transformation of his soul. At this time, even if he was killed, as long as he stepped out of his primordial spirit, he would have the power to rebuild his body and regain the power of rebirth in the future. In addition to the brand new transformation of his cultivation and soul, Lin Sun's spirit, perception of the great Tao, and control of the power of martial arts were also completely different from before. This was a kind of extreme transformation, no less than nirvana. It was a kind of sublimation of the essence of life, transcending the five realms and the past. He was completely different. From now on, what Lin Sun wanted to seek was the path to immortality. What he wanted to comprehend was the law of kingship, and what he wanted to master was the power of kingship. After a long time, Lin Sun exhaled a long breath and suddenly opened his closed eyes. In an instant, two flashes of lightning cut through the void, which was extremely frightening. Lin Sun's inner excitement and joy all calmed down at this moment. He converged his breath. Just from the appearance, he was no different from before, indifferent and transcendent. But only in the eyes of his peers could they clearly feel that Lin Sun was like an invisible abyss, unfathomable and frightening. Whoosh! In an instant, Lin Sun's figure disappeared out of thin air. After a long time, the practitioners inside and outside the city gradually woke up from that kind of shock. Heaven's retribution collapsed, Lin Sun became the king, and the 18 sons of Ksitigarbha had been erased. When they recalled these scenes, the expressions of every single cultivator became complicated, and they carried reverence, fear, envy, and a sense of loss. The passage of the upper 9 realms had been open for nearly a month, but Lin Sun didn't leave. Many practitioners thought that he was worried about being besieged after entering the upper 9 realms and losing his life. Even some descendants of major forces secretly speculated that as long as Lin Sun dared to go there, he was bound to be killed by others. But no one expected that today, Lin Sun became a king, and a supreme king at that. I'm starting to worry about the enemies of demon god Lin. Some people look strange. Do you remember that before Wu Yuanzhen, Miao Tsen, Wang Yuntong, and Shang Chong went to the upper 9 realms, these kings said that they would end demon god Lin's life in the upper 9 realms? It can be foreseen that these guys are going to be out of luck. Many people's expressions became strange. Fenshan Valley. Lin Sun's figure suddenly appeared in front of the mysterious divine fire palace. There are only 3 days left. Why hasn't the old toad appeared yet? With his nature, How could he miss all kinds of heaven-defying opportunities in the upper 9 realms? Lin Sun looked at the palace. After advancing to the king realm, his perception had become different from before. At this moment, in his eyes, the aura of this palace was extremely terrible, and it was related to the divine path. If he broke in by force, he was bound to end miserably. After a while, Lin Sun grabbed a huge rock, pressed his fingers together like a sword, and engraved a line of words on it: "I'll go first. See you in the upper 9 realms." Then, with a bang, the rock was inserted into the ground by Lin Sun. Lin Sun believed that, if the old toad came out, he would definitely notice it. Whoosh! In front of a fiery red river, Lin Sun's figure floated. When he first arrived in the realm of burning fairies, a strange big fish with extremely fierce combat power had appeared in the depths of this river. Although he didn't kill the fish in the end, Lin Sun inadvertently discovered the secret in the depths of the river. Lin Sun's figure flashed and sneaked in. At the bottom of the river, there was a mysterious bronze gate, engraved with mottled Taoist patterns and shining with a strange luster. On the other side of the bronze door stood a stone pillar with a thick and translucent fiery red chain coiled around it. The other end of the chain was tied to a stone statue of a fierce beast. The fierce beast was like a dragon with a coiled body. It was as huge as a mountain, vivid and lifelike. When Lin Sun arrived, the stone statue of the fierce beast seemed to come to life, exuding a terrible evil spirit, which made the river boil. Clatter, the fiery red chain tied to the stone statue of the fierce beast glowed, crystal clear, and mysterious symbols appeared, suppressing the evil spirit. Lin Sun was not surprised. He had seen this scene before, but at that time, he was still in the reincarnation developing realm, so he didn't dare to come here rashly. But now, Lin Sun was in the king realm, so he would not be afraid. With a flick of his sleeve, a surge of energy rushed out and pushed against the tightly shut bronze door. Boom! To Lin Sun's surprise, the bronze gate was easily pushed open, revealing the scene inside. Inside the gate was an extremely old palace, but it was empty, as if it had been buried for countless years. In the center of the palace stood a fiery red Taoist altar. According to Lin Sun's speculation, there should have been some treasures on the Taoist altar, but now it was also empty. Soon, Lin Sun noticed that on the dusty ground there was a line of footprints, which was extremely light. Qi Yao. Lin Sun sensed it and keenly captured a unique breath, which he was sure came from Qi Yao. She came one step ahead of me, and seems to have taken away the good fortune left here. Lin Sun frowned. Originally, he planned to come here before going to the upper 9 realms to see if he could get any good fortune, but now it seemed that it was impossible. No, there is still a wisp of tribulation energy in this hall that has not completely dissipated. Suddenly, Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. Could it be that Qi Yao had obtained a good fortune here, and became a king in one fell swoop? Lin Sun had just passed the ultimate king tribulation, so he was very familiar with the tribulation energy. He could conclude that there had been a great tribulation here. If that was the case, the current Crimson Jade had probably already become a king at the pinnacle. After all, she had been silent for tens of thousands of years in order to reach the Supreme King realm. Since she had chosen to pass the tribulation, it was definitely not as simple as just stepping into an ordinary king realm. Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh with emotion. When he had just arrived at the burning immortal realm, he had accidentally discovered this mysterious place of good fortune. If he had grasped it at that time, would he have been able to step into the ultimate king realm a long time ago? Now, it had benefited Qi Yao instead. But right after that, Lin Sun shook his head and smiled. His path towards the Tao had never been pinned on such illusory good fortune and good fortune. In the end, Lin Sun left. At the bottom of the river, the ferocious beast statue that was bound and suppressed by fiery red chains suddenly opened its eyes after Lin Sun left. It was icy cold and indifferent, and it flowed with an extremely ghastly and bloodthirsty aura. Interesting, this kid actually has the aura of old man Xing Yan. Unfortunately, I can only wait until this ultimate domain is destroyed before I have a chance to break free from the suppression of Chun Linkong and return to the ancient Star Han path. But I wonder how long I have to wait. A sigh that revealed endless unwillingness and hatred resounded faintly at the bottom of the river. Then, the ferocious beast statue closed its eyes. Everything returned to calm. Ancient City of Immortal Incineration. Chapter 1194. Lin Sun stood above the immortal burning city. In the city, some cultivators had already noticed this scene. They couldn't help but stop what they were doing and look up. Everyone knew that Demon Lin was going to leave the immortal burning realm for the upper 9 regions. Child Lin, I wish you a safe journey. A young girl summoned up her courage and shouted out loud. Suddenly, other cultivators also reacted and spoke out one after another. Taoism Peer Lin, the upper 9 regions are extremely dangerous. You must take care. We are all looking forward to seeing Child Lin dominate the upper 9 regions and defeat all the talents in the world. Take care. Men and women, old and young, all of them gave their blessings from the bottom of their hearts. All of these cultivators were cultivators that didn't belong to any sect, or they were from small powers. They all knew very well that if it weren't for Lin Sun's presence in the city, it would have been impossible for them to get rid of the oppression and exploitation of those big forces. Now that Lin Sun was about to go to the upper 9 regions, they could only express their gratitude and blessings in this way. Lin Sun was stunned at first, and then he smiled and cupped his hands without saying anything. Humph, he is not the only one who has become a king. Demon Lin, you must be careful when you go to the upper 9 regions. Don't get into trouble. However, just as Lin Sun was about to leave, a sarcastic snort sounded. It was obviously intentional and very loud. Then, a burst of laughter sounded, which sounded more and more harsh. Everyone looked up and saw a group of men and women standing there, making unscrupulous remarks about Lin Sun and making sarcastic remarks. They were the descendants of a big force. What are you looking at? Demon Lin has become a king. Can he rush into the city and kill us? The golden-robed young man sneered, looking very unscrupulous. The other cultivators' expressions changed, but they had to admit that they couldn't refute this. Becoming a king meant that he couldn't enter the city. At that time, Demon Lin also hid in the city, and got a chance to save his life. Otherwise, how could he be alive today? The golden-robed young man became more and more unscrupulous, and his voice was full of mockery. Lin Sun was a little surprised. He didn't expect that before he left. These guys couldn't help but have a complacent attitude. Demon God Lin, are you unconvinced? Noticing Lin's gaze, the golden-robed man couldn't help laughing. He pointed at his nose and said, "Come on, I'm right here. Come and kill me if you dare." This sort of behavior caused the other cultivators to be unable to bear it any longer. Everyone around the golden-robed man roared with laughter, fearless. However, right at this moment, the eyes of the golden-robed man who was laughing complacently suddenly bulged out, and then his entire body suddenly twitched violently. Then, under everyone's shocked gazes, he knelt on the ground with a thud and never got up again. His companions nearby were all dumbstruck. The complacent smiles on their faces froze, and their eyes were wide open in disbelief. How could this be? At this time, Lin Sun said with a smile, "Everyone can see clearly that this guy asked to kill him. Don't blame me." His words were casual, but it sent chills down one's spine. The other heirs of the great powers who noticed this gasped and went silent like cicadas in winter. However, Lin Sun had already withdrawn his gaze and didn't want to argue with him anymore. Whoosh! At the same time, Little Silver also returned and asked with some doubts, "Master, why don't you let me kill them all?" Lin Sun said casually, "I'm afraid of dirtying your hands. If you want to kill the strongest of their sections." As he said, his figure flashed and rushed into the passage leading to the upper 9 realms. There was a dead silence in the immortal burning city. Although Lin Sun had left, his prestige still remained, and no one dared to speak blatantly. Distant Fire Realm. One of the upper 9 realms. In a primitive jungle that was rarely visited by humans. Decaying leaves piled up on the ground. The branches and leaves of the ancient trees covered the sky. There was no sunlight all year round, which made the place dark and damp. Occasionally, there was a shrill roar, which was particularly horrifying in this silent and gloomy atmosphere. This was obviously in the deep mountains. Ancient trees towered to the sky, giant vines spread, ancient beasts roared, and fierce birds flew across the sky, with an ancient and desolate atmosphere. Lin Sun walked in it with a trace of amazement on his face. If he hadn't been sure that time had not been reversed, he would have suspected that he had come to the primitive era at the beginning of ancient times. Everything was ancient, primitive, and suffused with a boundless aura that assaulted the face. This was the distant Fire Realm. It was like a big world, in which there were many secret realms, relics, and taboo areas. Lin Sun had been here for a quarter of an hour. The most urgent thing is to find a place to cultivate, stabilize the foundation of the king's realm, and perfectly control the power of the king's realm. The king's realm has begun to control the power of Tao. It's not difficult for me, but it takes time to comprehend. At the same time, it's time to consider forging my own supreme weapon of King's Way. Lin Sun shuttled through the deep mountains and old forests, observing the situation around and thinking silently in his heart. The supreme weapon of King's Way was the life treasure of every King's Realm strongman. If it was properly cultivated, it could exert unimaginable power. In the past, Lin Sun had seen many practitioners use this level of treasure. But most of them were not their own treasures, and their cultivation was below the King's Realm, so they couldn't exert the power of such treasures at all. By the way, there's also the gate to heaven. Lin Sun thought of one thing. The mysterious woman once said that when he stepped into the Extinction King's realm, he could enter the heaven accessing place again. Immediately, Lin Sun shook his head. There was no hurry. Every time he entered the heaven accessing place, he would have a chance to get out safely. If he encountered an irresolvable danger, he could make full use of this opportunity. The ancient forest was dark, but the spiritual qi was extremely strong. Along the way, Lin Sun saw a lot of spiritual medicines, most of which were tens of thousands of years old, and many king medicines were transformed from them. Lin Sun naturally picked them without hesitation. When he was crossing the Extinction King's tribulation, the Thunder Yuan spiritual liquid, the Golden Wind Dew, the Star Aperture Recovery Pill and other treasures had already been consumed. Now there were only more than 10 king medicines left, which were far from enough for future cultivation. Because the king's realm was different from the 5 realms, the power needed for cultivation was too great, and the spiritual marrow was far from enough. Suddenly, Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. A blazing Taoist light appeared all over his body, and his figure suddenly disappeared. Boom! The ground where he had been standing exploded, and a huge white bone claw stretched out from below, smashing the trees within a radius of 300 meters, and the void collapsed. Looking from a distance, each bone of the giant white bone claw was as big as a stone pillar, branded with twisted blood-colored Taoist patterns. The aura it emitted was so fierce that it seemed to be able to crush the sun, the moon, the mountains, and the rivers. Lin Sun couldn't help but gasp, feeling horrified, and stayed far away from this area. He remembered what the old toad had said before. The upper 9 realm was different from the 3,000 worlds. There were heaven-defying fortunes and heaven-defying tribulations, and everywhere was mysterious and weird. Even if the sages from the outside world had the opportunity to enter, they would never dare to break in. For example, the giant white bone claw that suddenly stretched out from the ground made Lin Sun, who had stepped into the Extinction King's realm, feel frightened. It could be imagined how dangerous this place was. This also sounded the alarm for Lin Sun, so he didn't dare to think too much. He concentrated on his journey and planned to leave this deep forest first. Whoosh! He rose into the air, intending to fly away. However, he just charged into the treetop area when a cry suddenly resounded, and then a ferocious flying beast suddenly charged out from the depths of the dense treetop that covered the sky. It was only 3 m long, and its pupils were silver in color. Its wings seemed as if they were made from golden divine iron and flowed with a terrifying glow of the Tao. Moreover, a pair of sharp claws stretched out, causing the nearby space to shatter and collapse like a piece of cloth. Lin Sun suddenly retreated and broke out in a cold sweat. In his divine sense, he didn't notice the existence of such a fierce bird at all. Fortunately, after being alarmed, the fierce bird directly rushed into the sky and ignored Lin Sun. Otherwise, according to Lin Sun's estimation, he would have to go through at least a hard battle to get out. Because the aura of this fierce bird was too strong, and the aura it released was stronger than any King Realm strongman he had ever seen. What the hell is this place? Lin Sun muttered to himself, looking a little solemn. He knew that what he needed to do most at the moment was to learn as much as possible about this strange and dangerous world and get more information. Otherwise, he was bound to be passive. On the way, Lin Sun was extremely careful and cautious. He also operated the wind-mocking eyes and dared not to neglect anything. Even so, he still encountered many dangers along the way. For example, an ancient tree with a body as red as blood suddenly came to life, and its branches were like thousands of huge whips, which broke the void and made long and narrow cracks. For example, a seemingly ordinary mountain emitted wisps of black Taoist light, which could silently devour all the creatures that approached it. In addition, there were also strange void cracks appearing from time to time. Every time they appeared, an area would be directly annihilated and completely wiped out. For several times, Lin Sun managed to avoid this kind of killing. Even the sky was not peaceful. From time to time, fierce birds passed by, each more terrible and fierce than the other. Lin Sun thought that after reaching the King Realm, at least in the upper 9 realms, he would not be afraid of anything. But now he knew that his thinking was too simple. In the upper 9 realms, what was really terrible was not the enemy, but the omnipresent dangers and the unknown. However, although it was dangerous, Lin Sun got a lot of spiritual herbs of heaven and earth along the way, including some rare magical materials and king medicines. It was a reality of the saying that the greater the risk, the greater the gain. One day and one night had passed. Lin Sun couldn't help but wonder if he had entered a forbidden area and was completely lost since he hadn't walked out of this weird and dangerous woodland yet. At this moment, there was a rustling sound in the distance, mixed with some conversations. Suddenly, Lin Sun was refreshed, and his black eyes were bright. There was a sense of relief and joy. Chapter 1195. Lin Sun exhaled a long breath of turbid air, and then he couldn't help gritting his teeth. Just now, he had just experienced an extremely difficult battle against a group of strange 6-winged blood mosquitoes. Each of them was as big as a fist, and their mouths were as sharp as blades. Their buzzing sound was like thunder, rumbling and shocking the soul. Moreover, these 6-winged blood mosquitoes appeared in groups. Not only were they extremely fast, but they could also spit out a kind of green poisonous flame. If one was bitten by it, his spirit would be devoured in an instant. It was really vicious and terrible. Even with Lin Sun's current combat power, he was still killed by this group of 6-winged blood mosquitoes. In the end, he had no choice but to escape. There were too many 6-winged blood mosquitoes, and it was impossible to kill them all. At this time, Lin Sun's whole body was scorched black, and there were many bloody holes on his body. He had lost most of his chi and blood. He was quite embarrassed. This was considered light. Since entering the distant fire realm for a day and a night, he had experienced at least a dozen similar dangers. Several times, his life was hanging by a thread, and he was surrounded by danger. Lin Sun had enough of this damn place and was eager to leave. Therefore, when he noticed that there was a conversation in the distance, Lin Sun's excitement and joy could be imagined. Without hesitation, he approached there. Let's go back. This is the Styx forbidden area. Even sages don't dare to enter. It's too scary. In the dark ancient forest, a white-robed woman was a little nervous. She was beautiful, and her eyebrows were like the moon. Her name was Rue Monroe. Beside her, there were 5 or 6 companions, all of whom were descendants of the Beast's Mountain. The leader was a man in a wide robe and a wide belt. He looked arrogant and conceited. His name was Wu Lutao, who had become a king in the 3000 world. Hearing this, Wu Lutao thought for a moment and said, "What do you think?" He was also a little scared. The Styx forbidden area was one of the most terrible forbidden areas known in the distant Fire Realm. I think Senior Sister Rue is right. This place is too dangerous. Even if Demon God Lin appears in this area, I'm afraid he can't come out alive. The others nodded. They had been wandering in this area for nearly a month, and they didn't dare to go deeper. Even then, they frequently felt extremely terrified and horrified, and it caused their minds to be on the verge of being unable to endure it. That damned demon Godlin, why haven't we seen any traces of him until now? Could it be that he already had a premonition that we were looking for him, so he gave up on entering the upper 9 realms? Wu Lutao frowned. According to speculation, the cultivators who entered through the passageway to the burning immortal realm would definitely appear in the distant Fire Realm. But now nearly a month had passed, but no trace of Lin Sun had been found, which made people feel strange. In my opinion, he's either already dead, or he doesn't dare to come. Right? Countless great powers are searching for his tracks in the distant Fire Realm now. So long as he dares to make an appearance, he's bound to be encircled and annihilated at the first possible moment. Speaking of Lin Sun, these men and women all showed undisguised hatred on their faces. Forget it. Let's return. The distant Fire Realm is not peaceful. It's completely different from the immortal burning realm. There are too many heirs of superpowers here. Wu Lutao made his decision. Although senior brother Wen Aohai has stepped into the Extinction King stage, with just him alone, he can only protect our myriad beast spirit mountain brothers from being bullied. So, we must increase our strength as soon as possible. Wen Aohai. As soon as the current divine son of myriad beast spirit mountain entered the distant Fire Realm, he'd coincidentally entered into a mysterious abode and obtained a heaven-defying fortune, allowing him to step foot into the Extinction King stage in one go. This was something that no one could have imagined before this, and it was like a miracle. During this period of almost a month, miracles like this had occurred repeatedly in practically every single area of the upper 9 realms. Those that succeeded appeared like bamboo shoots after the rain, and it caused a great stir and uproar. Most of them were ordinary King Realm cultivators. Failures were common as well. In light cases, they were reduced to the half-step King Realm, and in severe cases, their souls were directly obliterated. Amongst them, there was no lack of ancient freaks that were looked upon favorably by all, yet they failed to overcome the ultimate tribulation and were eliminated by the tribulation. The silence, forbearance, and waiting of the ages had all been in vain in the end. This was the struggle for the Grand Tao. If one couldn't see through life and death, then one couldn't overcome the tribulation. Wu Lutao and the others had seen numerous similar scenes, and from their initial shock, they'd already become accustomed to it now. Although there was a heaven-defying fortune in the upper 9 realms, not everyone could rise up casually. On the contrary, compared with the 3 realms, the upper 9 realms was more dangerous and the competition was more fierce. It was no exaggeration to say that death was happening all the time. Without any delay, Wu Lutao and the others turned around and retreated. The more they saw death and blood, the more they realized the value of life. The forbidden land of Styx was so horrible that they didn't have the mood to explore it. However, they didn't notice that a figure was following them in the dark. No wonder this damn place is so abnormal. It turns out to be a forbidden land that no one dares to go deep into. Lin Sun's lips twitched. From the conversation of Wu Lutao and the others, Lin Sun had already understood how dangerous the place he had been shuttling through for a day and a night was. He didn't know whether he should consider himself unlucky or feel lucky. 2 hours later, when Wu Lutao and the others walked out of the ancient dense forest, they couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, as if they had just walked out of the gate of hell. If it was possible, they really didn't want to come here again. At the same time, Lin Sun's eyes lit up. Outside the dense forest, the sky was bright, and there was a vast and gentle plain. The lush weeds were swaying in the wind, and the wind brought rich and pure spiritual energy, which made people feel relaxed and happy. Whoosh! Wu Lutao and the others rose into the air and flew away. Lin Sun didn't have time to think too much. He ran by Qi to cover his breath and followed them closely. The void was blue, and the clouds were like snow. Between heaven and earth, there were undulating mountains and rivers, a primitive and ancient atmosphere of wilderness. From time to time, figures could be seen crossing the void in the distance, shining brilliantly and disappearing in a flash. Occasionally, there were huge divine birds flying across the sky, spreading their wings like clouds in the sky, covering the sky. Wherever they passed, the void was chaotic and collapsed. On the earth, there were herds of beasts galloping, tigers roaring and wolves howling. Each kind of creature was fierce and their breath made people's hearts tremble. 8-winged starbird, fire-tailed flying antelope, double-winged blood centipede, dim giant serpent, vigorous bear centipede. Lin Sun was surprised along the way, because the divine birds and fierce beasts he saw had long been extinct in the outside world, even in the ancient times. At the same time, Lin Sun clearly felt that the rules of the Great Way between heaven and earth were clearly visible, and there were surging vitality and dense spiritual energy in the void. It was no exaggeration to say that any random place for cultivation was comparable to the best blessed land in the outside world. If that was all, it was not magical and special. What really moved Lin Sun was that with the sense of Qi, he could more intuitively, clearly and easily perceive the traces of the Great Way. The Tao was extremely mysterious, and there were no traces to be found. Seeking the mysteries and seeking the way were the biggest problems that troubled countless practitioners, but in the mythical fire territory, one of the upper 9 realms, it was easy to experience. This was undoubtedly incredible. It's no wonder that all the top figures in the world want to enter the upper 9 realms and pin their hopes on breaking through and becoming kings. This place is really too magical, just like the legendary Pure Land of Miracles. Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart. He had a feeling that if he was able to grab hold of every single opportunity in the next 9 years, then his path towards the Tao was bound to advance by leaps and bounds. Here we are. In the distance, Wu Lutao and others showed a relaxed look. Lin Sun looked up and saw a spiritual mountain on the horizon in the distance. It was surrounded by clouds and mist, and the divine light fell like a waterfall. It was a sacred scene. The spiritual energy from all directions gathered on the mountain like thousands of streams returning to the origin, making it look like a pure land where the gods live. Whoosh! When they arrived at the mountain, Wu Lutao and others floated down. There was no doubt that this was the place occupied by the descendants of the beast's spiritual mountain. It was a magical and extraordinary mountain, full of spirit and spirit. These guys really know how to enjoy life. It's hard not to make progress in cultivation here. Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart. In the mountain gate, a group of practitioners came out to greet Wu Lutao and others. Senior Brother Wu, who is this junior fellow apprentice? How could he be so seriously injured? Suddenly, someone noticed Lin Sun, who was following closely behind, and couldn't help but be stunned. Wu Lutao, Rui Monrong and others were also stunned and couldn't help looking back. When they saw Lin Sun, they were also stunned. At this time, Lin Sun looked a little embarrassed. His body was scorched black. Although the wounds on his body had healed, the poison left by the six-winged blood mosquito could not completely disappear in a short time. So at this time, these descendants of the beast's spiritual mountain couldn't recognize his identity for a while. Lin soon ignored them and looked at the spiritual mountain in front of him with fiery eyes. When he got closer, he found that above the mountain, the spiritual energy was like a waterfall, which evolved into a strange scene of dragons and snakes coiling. In the cracks of the ancient rocks, ancient trees bloomed and bore fruit, and spiritual medicines and divine materials could be seen everywhere, filling the air with fragrance. In some places there was golden spiritual light rushing out, crystal clear. Looking carefully, it was actually a spring gurgling with spiritual liquid. Even the soil on the ground was filled with an incomparably dense vitality. Good place, it's really a good place. Lin Sun's eyes became more and more fiery. Friend, who are you? Why did you come to the territory of the beast's spiritual mountain? Wu Lutao and others frowned. From the beginning to the end, they didn't notice how this guy, who looked like a beggar, followed them. The territory of the beast's spiritual mountain? Then I came to the right place. Lin Sun withdrew his gaze and smiled slightly, revealing his snow-white teeth. Everyone was stunned and couldn't help looking at Lin Sun carefully. What did this guy mean? From his tone, it was obvious that he came to find trouble. But he was injured to this extent. How dare he come to find trouble? This gave people a very strange feeling, as if they had heard a big joke. Chapter 1196. Demon Lin. These 3 words seemed to have magic power, causing everyone present to be shocked and their faces to change abruptly. The atmosphere suddenly became dead silent. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd and said, "Haven't you been looking for me? Now that I'm here, why don't you welcome me?" Wu Lutao and the others twitched their lips. Welcome? It was merciful not to kill him immediately. At this time, they finally recognized Lin Sun's identity, and their expressions changed from the initial shock to a strange one. No one expected that Demon Lin, who had been searching for nearly a month, would take the initiative to appear in such a manner. Was he tired of living? Ha ha ha! Many people couldn't help but laugh. The Demon Lin in front of them was almost unrecognizable and miserable like a beggar, but he still dared to come and provoke them. It was ridiculous no matter how they looked at it. I admit that this guy's courage is really boundless. He's injured like this, but he still came to provoke us. I can't help but admire him. Someone sneered. Wu Lutao and the other King Realm strongmen frowned and looked at Lin Sun. They felt something was wrong, but they couldn't tell what was wrong. Because Lin Sun's breath was completely restrained, and he looked miserable, they couldn't sense anything special about him. Lin Sun smiled and pointed to the spiritual mountain in front of him, saying, "From now on, this place belongs to me. If you don't want to die, submit to me obediently. In the future, mining, planting, serving tea, pouring water, and so on will all need manpower." The group of people were stunned, and they were furious in their hearts. This fellow was already injured to this extent, yet he still dared to boast so shamelessly and vainly wanted to occupy their territory? Demon Lin, you don't think this is still the world of immortals, do you? Rui Monrong said, wondering if Lin Sun was crazy. Lin Sun smiled. What's the difference? While talking, he had been sensing and found that the mountain was covered with 18 restrictions, which were very unusual. But that was all, far from being a threat. "I'll kill you." A man couldn't hold back anymore. His face darkened. He shouted and spat out a mouthful of green light at Lin Sun. Clang! However, Lin Sun, who was covered in scars and scorched black, only needed to flick his fingers to shatter the attack. This was a green spirit saber that was refined from a rare beast bone. It was incomparably sharp, but now, with a crack, it was broken. Everyone was shocked and their expressions changed slightly. "I'm a man of my word. As long as you submit to me, I can spare your lives, Lin Sun said casually as he glanced at the crowd. This infuriated everyone. This fiend celestial Lin was too arrogant. All of you, step down. Let me do it. Wu Liuto's gaze was like lightning while his entire body emanated the imposing aura of a king, and strands of extremely blazing light coiled around his body. Demon God Lin, back in the burning immortal realm, we couldn't do anything to you because you were hiding in the city. But now you'd better kneel before me. Wu Liutao was very conceited. He grabbed Lin Sun's head from a distance. This strike blotted out the sky and erupted with dazzling light, and it fully revealed the elegant bearing of a king realm expert. Everyone was in high spirits and looked at Lin Sun as if he was a dead man. Bang! However, Lin Sun stood there motionlessly, and the force of this grab collapsed halfway, turning into a rain of light that dispersed. Wu Liuto's pupils suddenly constricted as he finally realized the problem. But right at this moment, Lin Sun also made a move and pressed his palm down. Kneel first, then talk to me. Wu Liutao tried his best to resist this palm, but as soon as they collided, he couldn't bear it anymore, and blood sprayed from his mouth and nose. Then, with a plop, he knelt there, and a large pit was smashed out on the ground, causing smoke and dust to fill the air. Everyone was dumbfounded and almost jumped up in shock. Wu Liutao was a true king who had condensed the Tao seed. Although he hadn't stepped into the peak of the king realm, his combat strength was still strong enough to annihilate any existence below the king realm. But now he was forced to kneel by a slap. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said to himself, "It seems that ordinary king realm experts are too weak, and there's nothing worth paying attention to in the past." Although Lin Sun had confronted with king realm experts many times, he had never fought with them with his own strength. Now that he had stepped into the extinction king realm, although he knew that his combat strength had changed dramatically, he didn't have a specific concept of how strong he was. Therefore, he was still a little cautious before and didn't neglect his attack. But now he finally understood that there was no need to pay attention to a character like Wu Liutao at all. They were both kings, but there was already a world of difference between them. Hearing this, Wu Liutao, who was kneeling on the ground, changed his face and roared, "Hurry up, let's attack together, he has become a king." Others had already noticed that something was wrong, so how could they neglect it? "So what? Who hasn't become a king yet?" A burly young man shouted, holding a black axe, and chopped at Lin Sun. He was like a barbarian king. With one blow, the wind and thunder surged and the void was chaotic. At the same time, several other king realm experts also moved together and attacked Lin Sun. They were shocked that Lin Sun had become a king, but they were not afraid because they were also kings. Moreover, Lin Sun was covered with scars and scorched black. Obviously, he was seriously injured, so they didn't feel any burden when they attacked. Couldn't they deal with a seriously injured demon god Lin? Unfortunately, you know nothing about power. Lin Sun also made a move. His figure flashed and disappeared out of thin air. The king realm stood proudly above the 5 realms of cultivation. In the past, it was enough to make any reincarnation developing realm tremble. Even Lin Sun almost died when he was besieged by Wu Yuanzhen, Miao Tsen, and the other 2, and he had no power to resist at all. But now everything was different. In an instant, the burly young man with the giant axe was smashed away by Lin Sun's punch. His tendons and bones were broken, and he flew out and smashed hard on the mountain rock. The other king realm experts shouted in surprise and fought with all their strength. Unfortunately, although they reacted fast, Lin Sun was faster than them. With 2 muffled sounds, 2 figures were sent flying. One's chest collapsed and he knelt on the ground. The other's neck was directly broken, and his spirit didn't have time to escape, and he died on the spot. How is this possible? The other king realm experts were dumbfounded. After all, they were all king realm experts, but now they seemed weak and vulnerable. Not to mention them, Even those who hadn't become King Realm experts in the distance were trembling with shock. Their eyes were wide open, and they couldn't believe what had happened. Just now, they were still sneering at Lin Sun, thinking that he was courting death and was tired of living. In the end, such a thing happened, catching them off guard. They were all dumbfounded and shocked to the point that their souls almost flew out of their bodies. He has set foot in the extinction King Realm. At this moment, Wu Lutao finally dared to conclude that demon god Lin, who looked badly injured, was not only a King Realm expert, but also a King Realm expert. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to have such terrifying combat strength. That was the only way to explain why the combat strength he was displaying right now was so powerful. Extinction King Realm? The others were stiff all over, and their souls almost left their bodies. In the burning immortal realm, when demon god Lin was still at the reincarnation developing realm, he already had the combat strength to massacre all the major forces. Now that he had set foot in the extinction King Realm, how terrifying would he be? Puff, puff, puff. While everyone was still in shock, Lin Sun had already killed 3 kings in a row. His casual attack was like a thunderbolt with the power to destroy everything. It was unstoppable. Quick, go and ask for help. Wu Lutao roared, his eyes red. Now he finally understood why Lin Sun dared to appear in such a manner. This guy was obviously here for revenge. Rui Monrong and the others fled in panic, rushing up the spiritual mountain. Puff! Behind them, Wu Lutao was also killed. His eyes bulged out, and he looked lost and unwilling even at the moment of his death. So what if he was in the King Realm? To Lin Sun, it was no different from killing chickens and dogs. Blood rained down, and the thick smell of blood permeated in front of the mountain gate. Lin Sun put his hands behind his back and looked up the spiritual mountain. Around him, corpses were lying on the ground in disorder. It was a horrible sight. On the mountain, screams rang out and there was chaos. Quick, ask Senior Brother Wanauhai for help. Demon God Lin is here. Rui Monrong's hair was disheveled, and she looked terrified. Demon God Lin? The experts of the Thousand Beast Spirit Mountain were stunned. They had been searching for traces of Demon God Lin for a long time. Now that he had come to die, wasn't it a good thing? Junior Sister Rui, why are you so scared? It's just Demon God Lin. In the burning immortal world, he could only hide in the city to survive. Now that he has come to the Upper Nine Realm, wouldn't it be easy to kill him? A King Realm expert said disdainfully. He. Rui Monrong's teeth were trembling, and she was so anxious that she was sweating profusely. She couldn't even speak. What's wrong with him? Someone frowned. At this moment, they also sensed that something was wrong. Boom! At this moment, the mountain shook, and the restrictive formation covering the mountain began to buzz violently. It was on the verge of collapse. Not good! On the mountain, everyone was shocked. This was a king path restrictive formation. Even if a life and death realm king came, it would be difficult to shake it. If one entered it by mistake, he might even be killed on the spot. Boom! However, before everyone could react, a deafening rumble resounded, and the king path restrictive formation that covered the entire mountain exploded into pieces. Formation diagram after formation collapsed and transformed into a dazzling rain of spirit markings that covered the sky. At the same time, a figure walked out from the rain of light. His figure was tall and graceful, and his steps were calm as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. The sound of people gasping rose and fell on the mountain. All the disciples of the Thousand Beast Spirit Mountain felt their hearts tremble, and their expressions changed indeterminately. Indeed, he was shaken by it. A king path restrictive formation was destroyed so easily as if it didn't exist. This in itself was too terrifying. He has become a king of the apex. Right at this moment, Rui Monrong finally spoke these words, and she seemed to have exhausted all the strength in her body. As soon as she finished speaking, her entire body went limp as if her soul had left her body. The surroundings were deathly silent. Chapter 1197. Peerless King. Every word was like thunder. From Rue Monrong's frightened and distracted look to the formation of King Path that covered the mountain being easily broken. At this moment, when they heard the two words that were already legendary and shocking to begin with, a series of impacts surged out like a raging ocean, causing the experts of the myriad beast spirit mountain to be stunned and their hearts to tremble. The atmosphere also became dead silent, so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. Originally, some people were arrogant and disdainful of Lin Sun as a king's domain. Originally, when they heard that Lin Sun took the initiative to come to them, they were surprised and surprised. At this moment they were like ducks that had their necks grabbed. Their eyes were wide open, and they looked as if they had been caught off guard. Lin Sun glanced at them and was attracted by a place on the cliff at the top of the mountain. There was an ancient tree with a trunk like a dragon and cracked old bark. Only a white-colored flower bud that seemed as if it was sculpted from ice was condensed on the bald branch, and it flowed with rays of light while emanating numerous illusory divine lights that carried a sweet fragrance that refreshed the mind. Lin Sun was amazed by just one glance. There was no doubt that this was a divine tree, and the flower bud on it was destined to be extraordinary. This is impossible. Hundreds of peerless kings' tribulations have appeared in the distant fire realm. Only a small number of people have passed and become the peerless king. Most of them have failed miserably and died with regret. Suddenly, someone said in a deep voice, but no matter whether they succeeded or failed, none of the peerless king's tribulations were triggered by demon god Lin. It was a young man in red. He looked furious and couldn't believe it. The crowd was restless and shocked. If he wasn't a peerless king, how could demon god Lin be so powerful? Lin soon retracted his gaze and said with a smile, "What I said at the foot of the mountain still stands. As long as you surrender, we can avoid a lot of bloodshed here." As soon as he finished speaking, someone shouted angrily, "Wishful thinking!" Bang! Lin Sun didn't move, but an ice dragon appeared under his feet and rose into the air. Its tail was like a divine whip, smashing the man's head and causing him to die on the spot. Blood splattered all over the ground. Screams rang out as everyone stirred. They were alarmed and afraid. Fiend Celestial Lin actually dared to kill so brazenly. He clearly thought nothing of them. "Lin Sun, aren't you worried that my senior brother Wen Aohai will wipe you out when he returns?" The scarlet-robed man's face was ashen, and his eyes were about to split open. Hearing this, Lin Sun was suddenly enlightened and said to himself, "No wonder only cats and dogs like you showed up in such a big noise. It turns out that Wen Aohai is not here." Cats and dogs? The successors of the myriad beast spiritual mountain felt extremely humiliated and furious. Not satisfied? Then don't blame me for being ruthless, Lin Sun said indifferently. He was just about to attack when the vermilion-clothed man said, "Wait!" After that, his expression was bitter and filled with unwillingness as he said in a low voice, "We are willing to submit. Senior Brother Meng." The others all had sorrowful expressions, finding this hard to accept. The scarlet-clothed man took a deep breath and said resolutely, "Let's do it this way." Everyone was unable to calm down. As the successors of the myriad beast spiritual mountain, now they were coerced and suppressed to surrender. Who would be willing to accept this? This was absolutely a great shame. "Kneel down." Lin Sun's voice was calm. Just 2 words almost made the scarlet-clothed man lose his temper. Since they had already surrendered, did Demon Lin still want to humiliate them? "Demon Lin, you've gone too far." Someone couldn't hold back and shouted resentfully. Bang! Lin Sun waved his sleeve, and a ray of light swept out and erased the man, leaving no body behind. The man turned into ashes and scattered. The others almost went mad. They were ashamed and resentful to the extreme, and they were terrified to the extreme. Lin Sun put his hands behind his back and glanced at the crowd coldly. "Since you've surrendered, you should behave." Don't think I don't know what you're planning. You just want to endure for a while and wait for one Auhai to come back to save you." As soon as these words came out, everyone's face turned pale, and they were silent. "I'll give you a chance. Wait here for one Auhai to come back." Lin Sun's voice was indifferent, "But before that, you'd better behave. Even if one Auhai comes back, I'm afraid he can't save you." Plop. In the end, the scarlet-clothed man knelt down first, his face ashen. Seeing this, the others' inner support seemed to collapse, and they also knelt down one after another. Lin Sun didn't mean to humiliate them. According to his original plan, he decided not to leave any trace of future trouble. But he was new here and was completely unfamiliar with the distant fire realm. He urgently needed to know all kinds of information, so he finally decided to let these people live. Moreover, when dealing with some trivial things, he could also order these people, so that he could save more time for cultivation. Of course, Lin Sun couldn't stay here for a long time. When he left, he would naturally deal with these successors of the myriad beast spiritual mountain. As for whether to kill or let go, it depended on their performance. Half a quarter later, Lin Sun had learned that this mountain was called Starnet. It was originally the territory of eight-winged Starnet, but later it was occupied by a group of strong practitioners of the myriad beast spiritual mountain led by one Auhai. This mountain was 3,900 zhang tall. The mountain was precipitous, and it was extremely beautiful. It gathered spiritual energy from all directions. In the outside world, it could be called a rare top-class blessed place. But according to these successors of the myriad beast spiritual mountain, in the distant fire realm, although similar blessed places could not be seen everywhere, there were definitely many. There were even some blessed places that were more beautiful and magical than Starnet, which were real miracles and pure lands. However, the number of such places was very small, and they had long been occupied by the super forces. Starnet Mountain was rich in a kind of magic material called divine gold, which was extremely precious and rare and had long been extinct in the outside world. After the successors of the myriad beast spiritual mountain occupied this place, they had been mining divine gold. At the same time, there was a natural fragmented metal spring on the mountain. The spring water flowing out was as crystal as pearls, purer than spiritual marrow, which could be used by strong practitioners in the king realm for cultivation. Besides that, there were numerous spirit herbs growing on Starnet Mountain, and there was no lack of precious treasures that had attained the king grade. In short, it was a blessed place that was difficult to encounter in the outside world, and occupying it was no different from obtaining a great fortune. However, what attracted Lin Sun the most was the divine tree on the side of the cliff at the top of the mountain. According to Senior Brother Wan Auhai, this is a Starnet divine tree, and the flower buds that have condensed on it will bear Starnet fruits soon. Rui Monrong looked depressed, and she forced herself to explain. Simply speaking, this Starnet fruit is a real magic medicine. Magic medicine! It was like a peerless treasure that could give birth to its own spirit. In the outside world, a magic medicine was even more precious than a King's Way extreme weapon, and it was extremely rare. Only those ancient orthodoxies could cultivate such a magic medicine, and there were very few of them. The greatest value of the divine medicine was that it could not only aid in cultivation and solidify one's cultivation, but it could also play an incredible role when a king realm expert was going through the longevity tribulation. Even if he was physically exhausted, seriously injured, and on the verge of death, so long as he swallowed a magic medicine, he could recover instantly, and it was no less than getting a new life. As for practitioners below the king realm, they were unable to absorb the power of magic medicine at all. Once they accidentally ate it, they would destroy their cultivation because they couldn't bear the medicine's efficacy. Lin Sun stood in front of the Starnet divine tree and stared at the snow-like flower bud on the treetop, and he was very tempted. This flower was the size of a fist, suffused with divine brilliance, and flowed with a gorgeous glow like ice and snow. Every petal was branded with profound and complicated Taoist markings, and it sprayed out a fragrance that intoxicated the soul. If one looked carefully, there seemed to be a little person sitting cross-legged in the stamen that was enveloped by the glow. The little person was motionless as if he was cultivating, and it actually gave people a sense of solemnity and holiness. This was the embryonic form of a spirit. When the flower bud matured and condensed into a fruit, it would give birth to a spirit. Moreover, according to Lin Sun's judgment, this star-net fruit would mature in less than a month and be ready for picking. For Lin Sun, king medicine would become a necessity for his cultivation in the future, and magic medicine would be a luxury that could only be found by chance. There was a simple stone house built beside the star-net divine tree. Lin Sun said thoughtfully, "This is the place where one Aohai cultivates, right?" Rue Monrong nodded with an even gloomier expression. She was very uncomfortable and resistant in her heart, and she felt extremely humiliated, but she had to obey, which caused her to suffer a kind of torture in her heart. Lin Sun ignored her and pushed open the door of the stone house. Suddenly, an extremely dense rain of light rushed out of the house, and it vaguely evolved into the image of a coiling dragon and snake. What an amazing spiritual chi! Lin Sun's black eyes lit up. Only now did he realize that there was a mystery in this stone house. He walked in and found that the space was not large, but it was filled with dense spiritual chi that seemed to be substantial. Being in it was like being immersed in spring water. Through the spiritual mist, Lin Sun saw clearly that there was a strange light golden jade on the ground. It was as smooth as a mirror, and it seemed to contain an ocean within it, giving people a feeling of vastness and holiness. The rolling rain of spiritual chi was surging out from this light golden jade. Ancestral Source Stone. Lin Sun could determine this item at a glance, and he couldn't help but be shocked. Spiritual veins gathered the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, and they were very common in the world. However, there were very few spiritual veins that could condense ancestral source stone. Only a primitive spiritual vein could give birth to such a magical item. The so-called primitive spiritual veins were spiritual veins that had been born since the world was born, and they had existed until now, accumulating the aura that had been accumulated for countless years. In the outside world, primitive spiritual veins didn't exist, but at least, even some ancient orthodoxies didn't have them. This place will be my place of cultivation in the future. Lin Sun occupied this place without hesitation. Unfortunately, whether it was the primitive spiritual veins or the ancestral source stone, they couldn't be moved. Otherwise, Lin Sun would absolutely not mind taking them away. Rue Monrong's expression was uncertain, and she was extremely depressed in her heart. Not only had the star-net fruit been targeted, but even the ancestral source stone had been occupied.